Show us a little bit more, but I'm hoping to. Yeah.
Who's missing? Craig's here. Veronica's here. Okay, we're calling to order the March 14, 2019 meeting of the Santa Barbara Community College District Board of Trustees. If those who wish to participate rise to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Wait a minute, I'm off. Sorry. We're here. I'm a page off, so why don't we just do it?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Someday.
Soon, man, soon.
Okay, I'll go back a page, get on schedule. For the record, all members of the Board of Trustees are in attendance this evening. We are about to go into closed session. We don't have any speaker slips for that item. Is that correct, Secretary?
Correct.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn to closed session?
I move to adjourn to closed session.
Is there a second?
I second. Maybe we could tell there's people here waiting for us about how long you expect it will be, if you have any idea at all.
Well, if you're going to put me on the spot, I'll say 30 minutes. 30 to 45 minutes?
Maybe we'll be 15, maybe we'll be 45, okay. At least
Something like
people
that.
know.
Okay.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The open session back to order. In item 4.3, we have nothing to take out of order this evening.
Do you have anything to report out?
Thank you. We have nothing to report at this time. We'll next go to public comment, and we have one general public comment tonight from Denise Adams.
Good afternoon, trustees. Thank you again for your service, and Dr. Beebe. My name's Denise Adams. I came on several topics today. One, I had submitted a request to the president and to the board regarding the addressing the issue of the chairman of the trustees. I had called for the full board to evaluate the trustee and to either ask for his censure or take a roll call vote for his removal. As per your board policies, you had 10 days to respond to me. I have not yet received a response, and I submitted the request on February 8th. So that was one issue that I wanted to make sure I called to your attention. I also wanted to call to your attention that at the meeting where you selected your interim board board president for Dr. Beebe, there was some ambiguity on the role of the student trustee. I know later you're going to have that on your agenda. I hope you'll listen very closely to the student trustee. We've done research with the educational code. It's very specific on what student trustees can and cannot do, what their responsibilities are, and their privileges. However, you will note in your board policy, you do not define as per law what the privileges are that you want to give to the student trustee. And I have great admiration for Mr. Ibechi, I'm sorry, cringe me, but for standing up for the students at that time on Saturday morning. But there was ambiguity. He has a wealth of information, and I hope when you get to that point in the board that everybody listens closely to what he has to say. I also wanted to raise the issue. I have called in the past for a review of the board policies so that everybody's clear on what the board policies say. If in fact you don't like anything, let's change it, because let's not have on the book stuff that you don't want to follow. Now, shifting gears, one of the issues I did want to raise to you before was the issue of demographics of the college. As you know, each community college has defined boundaries of who are in your service area. I raised this issue 6 years ago. It remains an issue. Students within our boundaries serviced by Santa Barbara City College should get priority at this institution. It is here to serve them. It is estimated that 55% of the student body here comes from outside of our district. They are secondary to the needs of our community. We support this college as a community. Our donors support it to serve our students. Perhaps it's time for the full board to consider a demographic study of who these students are, where they come from, why they come here, but they put a burden on our general community. I have submitted this testimony to the City Council because you do meet with them annually, sometimes semi-annually, about shared interest. The college is putting a burden on the community in its infrastructure, its housing, its roads.
2 minutes remaining.
And I think that the issues that were recently raised, I think it was in October or November, by Trustee Croninger about the demographics, we need to really get greater specificity on who these students are. Are they foreign? Are they Mill Valley? Who are they? But they are taking our housing and putting a stress on the community. And I think it would be helpful just for you to know who we're looking at and to make sure that our students go through first. You had in your documents that some of our students take 6 years to get through because of classes or this or that or the other. But let's find out what the issues are for our kids, because they are our priority in Santa Barbara. The demographics of the community insofar as not having the testing for students who need to make up their high school work is significant. As you know, you had a test for math and English, and approximately 60% of the students entering City College cannot pass that at a 5th grade level. That's 5th grade. People ask me why my two kids started here in 5th grade and finished here by 11th grade in high school. It's not hard because your criteria is based on a 5th grade education. And if we're not going to have these supplemental classes, it was raised at your December meeting, but it hasn't been followed through. Your trustees raised it. How are we going to handle the needs? Are we going to dumb down our classes? What happens? And then what's the value of a degree when you get it if, in fact, we don't know your mastery? Anyway, thank you for your time, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. So before moving on to item 6, we're going to introduce something out on the agenda, a single recognition this evening. I suspect that many of you may not realize that today is President Beebe's last board meeting. Therefore, it's time to recognize his outstanding contribution to Santa Barbara City College and the Santa Barbara Community College District. I wasn't here when he was hired in 2016, but I know of his important accomplishments before and since I joined the board a year ago. And I know firsthand of his exceptional qualities as a passionate leader supporting the success of students from all backgrounds and experiences. At the same time, he has pushed for, supported, and implemented numerous programs and events with focus on equity, diversity, and cultural competency. When I first met President Beebe 14 months ago, as I considered whether to apply for a vacant seat on the board, I was struck by his passion to serve the students who are underrepresented and marginalized. I recognized his passion to help students who are the first in their family to attend college. I saw his clear focus on student success. Indeed, President Beebe, you are the primary reason that I decided to apply for the trustee position. You embody and support all the reasons why I decided to apply for the trustee position. Community colleges perform such an important service for our community, the state, and the nation. President Beebe, the Board of Trustees unanimously thanks you for your service to Santa Barbara City College, and we wish you a successful and well-earned retirement.
Thank you.
Trustees, does anyone else wish to comment?
I'd like to echo what our president has said in terms of President Beebe's commitment to the students here, to our mission, and add that his outreach to the community has been second to none. And we certainly wanted to do that. We said that when he came on board, and he's been superb in making contact with the rest of the community and telling them the truth. And the truth is Santa Barbara City College is the pearl of the community college community. So I want to thank him for his service. I want to express my regret that he has had health issues and that admits fully that those issues are going to require some time and some dedication, and that deferred maintenance is just not called for. and wish you well in every possible respect.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony, for everything. You've been a friend, and I think you've done a great job here. So thank you for your service. And I will say, though, a lot of people I know who I've worked with, in my professional sense, they just retired and they're loving it. So
Okay,
I don't
that's
think
good to know.
they're really having a great time. So enjoy it, and I think you've earned it.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And I'll just say I appreciate this opportunity to pause our meeting to honor you, Anthony, because I have had some interactions with you over the years. My great regret is that I've come on the board just as you're leaving. And I do know that final meetings can sneak up on you. So this may be kind of surprising to you in some ways
is
that you're
very
here, that
surprising
this
to
is
me.
it. But I have felt so welcomed, even in the short time that I've been here, and I know where your heart has been. And it's made a huge difference to students here, and it makes a huge difference for trustees. So thank you. Thank you for your work, and enjoy your retirement.
So much, Kate.
Mr. and Mrs. Beebe have been such an amazing blessing to this community. And I knew that they were both special when I heard little kids talking about them, like in the courtyard when I got out of work, like at Roosevelt, and I'm on my way to a board meeting, and to hear parents and elderly and middle school kids, and I would be shocked to see him at junior high events. And I'm like, what are you doing here? And you'd see him at young adult kid, and then Montecito. And then I thought, wow, like, he's like such a good guy. And I just have to say, I admire just your character and how calm you are. And I have worked with so many different administrators in my educational career here, and your humanity comes out, and people get frazzled, and people get cranky. And the respect and the authenticity and the care that you've shown in this work is so admirable. And I am so grateful that my 13-year-old son got to hear of your leadership, that my kids are so proud that I spent a year as your board president and running out of my house at 6:30 to meet for 7 a.m. meetings, and just how much City College became a part of our life, but that my kids got to vicariously through me get to know more of you and Carolyn, and my daughter and my son and my husband are forever grateful for what you did for this community. And I am so grateful that my kids are going to be able to pick up in some of the great groundwork that you've left for higher education here. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, Anthony, I echo all of these statements. You have been extraordinary for us. We gave you a tall order. I mean, we told you we needed, as Peter touched on, we needed you to work with our community. We needed you to work with the foundation, and you have done it both, an incredible job there. And you walked in the door, we had a $9 million operating budget deficit, not mentioned in our interviews. And you walked in the door and guided us through that and helped us to figure out where to go and how to solve that problem.
Full disclosure, you might want to wait on got all the way through the board or the budget problem. But
I've
we're
looked
making
at the
progress.
budget presentation. I know, I've looked at that, but it's not a 5-minute fix. It's a long-term planning, it's understanding the long-term implications, the 5-year projections, all of that, and you brought that to us. We had significant numbers of our community mourning the loss of their state-supported non-credit classes. You put that program back on track, and it's growing, and people are so happy about that, and we have Melissa as well to champion that program. And then, on top of it all, what do we get? The mudslides, the fire. I don't think there's anyone who could have led us the way you did through those traumatic times and reached out to our community to make sure that we were a part of the community and helping with trying to make things better for folks who were severely traumatized in those events. Not to mention steering the school open or closed, and how do we deal with all the issues here on campus. We reached out, you reached out, and you were the one who did such an amazing job with that. So I could go on, but we're sure going to miss you, and thank you. And Carolyn.
Wow. I didn't realize until just before the meeting that this was going to be our last board meeting. I thought maybe the next one. So I didn't write this down. and I don't want to repeat what's already been said, especially what Mr. Haslam said, and then Ms. Croninger said a bunch of nice things. One of the priorities that Board of Trustees has and the president of a college has, one of the main things, goals that we try to reach, and we don't name it necessarily as this, but it's to preserve and improve the reputation of the college. And in all your efforts in what you've achieved, in this trustee's opinion, you exceeded those expectations. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Dr. Beebe, I just want to say thank you on behalf of all the students here. We're so grateful for your leadership and for your direction. I remember you calling us, me and the president, into your office and just giving us directions and advice how to lead the student government. We are so grateful for all your service. We're going to miss you, and we wish you well moving forward.
Thank you so much.
So next, we're going to stand up and do the photograph with a plaque that I'll read, and I guess I'm asking Luz if, can we kind of do it up here with,
Can I say, I'd like to say a little bit first, could I?
yes, you can.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the board for its faith, the trust, and support of me. I mean, because it's not about me, it's about all of us. This amazing team of folks that we've got here really need to be acknowledged. Each one of you brings a separate slice, a different perspective that is important to this entire board and to the entire college. And so I want to thank you for your service related to that. But I was thinking about also the amazing faculty that we have. And I've had the privilege of visiting classrooms behind the scenes that many people don't have a chance to see. And I've witnessed some amazing educational quality and extraordinary sophistication that's happening in the classrooms here that I want you to know about. That's quite amazing and extraordinary. But also the caring of the faculty beyond the actual instructional part, the actual caring of students and their success is absolutely amazing. And that's really what a community college is all about. I mean, we've got the smaller class sizes. They're able to reach the students in ways that you don't get when you're in a 200 or 300 person lecture hall at some of the huge universities. So the faculty really need to be mentioned here. I also need to call out the administration and classified staff for what they do here. A lot of times we overlook them and the day in, day out work of the classified staff and these administrators. This is not easy work. This is hard work. And it's an amazing work, and they're working hard at it every single day. And their mission is really one of service and support. And it's amazing, and I don't want us to forget that, because sometimes we do have a tendency to maybe overlook that mission of service and how they look at things. And then really, when we think about the students and how passionate and caring and energetic and motivated that they are, and we've seen some of that passion, and we've seen it firsthand. And that's not all bad, and that's actually very good that we've seen that, and we've embraced it, and we've brought it in, and we're moving on that. And it shows them that we care, and I think it should be inspirational to us that we are hearing them, and they're giving us that information to be able to move forward and move the institution forward. So I just want to thank you all for the privilege of serving you and the college.
Thank you, Dr. Beebe. So if we should all come down at the front?
Do you want to read that first?
I'm at the microphone. We're going to present Dr. Beebe a plaque which states, "In recognition and sincere appreciation of your outstanding contributions to Santa Barbara City College and the Santa Barbara community, with best wishes for a happy retirement, presented on behalf of the Santa Barbara City College Board of Trustees."
Thank you. It's beautiful, right? Well, thanks again to everybody. Appreciate that.
Okay, our next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes for the special meeting of March 2nd. I'm sorry, March 2nd, 2009.
19.
It's been moved, is it seconded?
2019. Yeah. Yes.
Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor? Aye. All those against? None. Next item on the agenda is the employment agreement for interim superintendent president Helen Benjamin. The contract between the college and interim president-to-be Benjamin has been discussed by the board. I don't believe we have any comments on that item. Is there a motion to approve the contract?
I second to approve the employment agreement for interim superintendent president.
Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Trustee Parker?
Yes. So I had a question on the expenses item number 8 on the contract that I'm wondering if maybe Mr. Price can come to the mic and talk about. And that is with the full recognition that, frankly, we are getting Dr. Benjamin for an incredible deal. I mean, she's being extremely generous with her time. One of the expenses that we will be paying for is lease or rental charges on a residence while she is here. And I was wondering if Mr. Price could talk to the reason why there's not an amount specified there, and then on how the board will hear and then the public will hear about the amount that ends up that the college needs to pay for rental housing.
There isn't an amount specified because when the contract was drafted, and the same thing holds true today, we don't know what the amount is going to be because already there have been comments about the extraordinarily high rents in Santa Barbara. And in working with a specialist in rental housing, I think there's only one place on the market that we were able to show Helen. So we thought it was unrealistic to try and put a specific number in, especially knowing that Helen indicated a very modest intent in going forward. And so instead, we decided, practically speaking, that the best option would be to leave it open-ended, but certainly with the expectation that she would share with us what her intention was and obtain the approval from the college. And of course, that would be made public.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just add that Dr. Benjamin is being extraordinarily generous to Santa Barbara City College. She's a retired chancellor from Contra Costa College, and therefore is limited in the amount she can be compensated for work during her retirement. So all the candidates or many candidates which we might consider for such a position are in a similar retirement situation. And she's willing to do this for us through the end of the year, the end of the calendar year, when under the limitation she has, we might have only gotten her for a few months. She's going to be with us for 9 months. And even when we consider the amount, we'll probably have to compensate or to allow for her housing. We're still getting a heck of a bargain. So we're very appreciative to Dr. Benjamin for her willingness to to assume this position in the manner that she has agreed to do. Any other comments? All those in favor of the contract?
Aye.
All those opposed? No, hearing no noes, the motion passes. We now have item 7.2, which is an amendment to the summary of the library incident investigation report that was presented, I believe, at the last, not the last meeting, but it was the last meeting, at the February 28 meeting. Are there any, is there a motion or any questions about the supplemental report? Okay.
Is a motion required?
No, motion is not required, actually.
No.
Trustee Parker?
Well, I just appreciate that, that the amendment, that it's much clearer and about what happened and the fact that students did in a, not instantaneous, but certainly in a timely manner, talk about what had happened in the presence of educational program administrators, and that this clarifies, this definitely just makes it much clearer, I think, both to the board and to the public about what happened. And so I really do appreciate that.
Trustee Abechi?
I would just like to ask why there was a difference between the earlier reports and this report. What changed? What happened with the investigation?
If I could call on Mr. Price to explain the difference.
There were really two things that happened. Number one, when we were doing the presentation at the last board meeting, although the memo itself was correct, I had my notes. And when it got to Mr. Shoulder's part of the presentation, reading off of what I said, he indicated that the library incident first came to the attention of the college at the November 19 board meeting, and that was completely wrong. The memo itself, the original memo, indicated that although it did come up at the November 19 board meeting, that the information had been shared earlier with college administrators. But afterwards, in view of the error that was ours as your lawyers, and input from Dr. Ralston, who indicated that she felt that it would be very important to fill in more of the information about the sharing of the occurrence that did happen with Pamela and others. And certainly, I thought that was a good idea, and she worked on actually drafting the amended language, and far be it from me to ever think of editing anything that Dr. Ralston wrote. So what you're seeing is a reflection of something that corrects the oral record, and it also provides a lot more useful information in terms of what it is that actually occurred in the, if not immediate, in the proximate aftermath of the event itself.
Just a follow-up question. The private investigator, was she or he able to find out if it was reported or not?
Well, I'm sorry,
The
was
private
it?
investigator, was she or he able to find out if this was reported or not?
Well, okay, so first question, the investigator, and I'll answer your question specifically. The investigation report indicated that there was no finding made, one way or another, as to whether or not the N-word was actually yelled out in the library. Part of that, I'm sure, had to do with the fact that the investigator didn't come in until some period of time after it happened. So how did one actually know? And the students chose not to be interviewed by the investigator. So that finding wasn't made. But your question specifically was what about the investigator?
No, you answered it. That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for putting together the more accurate amended version to clear the record. I appreciate it. I like that it does reiterate there was a shortcoming in the college and that we have recommendations to be better on roles, responsibilities, and process. But it says, could you just talk more about what some of those recommendations would be for the improved complaint process and training? Just, I know we don't have to go too deep into it, but just a quick sketch of what that would
Well, I
look like.
think there are a lot of things in play that perhaps Dr. Beebe and others are in a better position to answer than me, but certainly you know that you have a new Title IX officer who's very competent and this isn't just racial incidents, we're talking across the board about complaints. There is and has been work to clarify the complaint document itself and not require people to have to struggle like I think they did in order to check the right boxes. In other words, they make their complaint and it's up to officials here at the college to fit a label and to determine who needs to do what, not up to the students to identify, which area and who's going to be responsible for it and so on. I know that there's reinforcement of the fact that when college officials become aware of some of these incidents, whether the students report them or not, that college faculty, for example, and managers are, I think I talked about it last meeting, mandated reporters. I think that everybody is more and more focused on the responsibility they have to jump on these things when they happen, because frankly, a lot of the aftermath of these things that occurred remained murky and questionable and subject to a lot of controversy because they weren't pinned down at the very beginning. And of course, I also mentioned that it would be important to reinforce that the importance of having students, if they are experiencing fear or if they feel that they are experiencing harassment, certainly any sort of overt bias in any way, that they be encouraged to report that so that it can be dealt with. And the hope also follows that the various counseling and other groups that work with and support students would be encouraged to tell the students to report it because the college wants to do something about it. If there's something that needs to be done, the college wants to get on and not find out about it 2 months later when it may be too late. So those are some of the things.
Yeah, no, that's great. I know we talked about it last time too, but I think it's good to keep reiterating it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. Our next item is item 7.3, Board Anti-Racism Resolution Discussion, and we have 3 speaker slips that have been submitted. First one for Daniel Wallace.
Hello, everybody. I basically wanted to be short and sweet and say that for the individuals who are still against this resolution as it stands, to please be as specific as you can as to what you're against it for, what specific item in there do you not support? Is it the idea that, and I think number 7 of the whereas statement, that there are equity gaps still on campus? It's been documented, well documented, that there are. Is it the idea that we're recognizing that there is racism on campus? If so, say so. And if the people who are against this resolution still in its amendment form are still against it, but they still insist on being a bit vague in general with why they're against it, I encourage the other members of the board to push them firmly and to be as specific as you can as to why they're against it. So, all in all, just to have a discussion on something that's apparently controversial, we need to be as specific as possible, and we need to understand where the other person's coming from, and to do that, we need to be specific. Thank you.
Thank you, and I probably should have reported this before Mr. Wallace came up, but let me just say that the resolution before us is the most recent version of the draft board resolution, including edits and suggestions from the superintendent, president, and others. And after further board discussion, it will go back to the interim superintendent, president, to take to campus constituent groups and committees for input, and then come back to the board for action at its April 11th meeting, as the school will be on spring break at its March 28th meeting.
Right.
Okay.
And I was surprised that this resolution amended isn't up for action, it's up for discussion, but it is good to get input on it, and I can see where further input would be useful.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Gregory Koss.
Good afternoon, trustees. I'm Gregory Koss, Santa Barbara resident and multi-tech company executive chairman, CEO is my background. My remarks are provided in written form for you, so I'll just try to go through a couple of the key points. So I'm not at City College, so I just look at the public information that's available to me as a disclosure. I compared the draft resolution to the SBCC mission statement and the 2019 Board of Trustees goals, and I have the following observations. First of all, to review our mission. SBCC provides students a diverse learning environment that inspires curiosity and discovery, promotes global responsibility, and fosters opportunity for all. Please note, this does not say, the use of the word opportunity does not say outcomes, equities, feelings. It says opportunity. Number 2, 2019 board goals. We're dedicated to making available comprehensive mental health services for all students. We have zero tolerance for sexual assault, harassment, and are committed to a campus that's safe for all students. So I did want to just point out, which I made this point at the last meeting, from 2015 to 2017, the mandatory public reporting shows there was 0 reported hate crimes, and certainly in 2015, 16, 17, and we still apparently don't have the data for 2018. But maybe it's 0 for that as well. And also just wanted to point out, and I'm sure you know, that campus security provides 7x24 escort to everyone on campus who may feel that somehow their safety is at jeopardy or they may be harassed. Okay, so these are my concerns of this resolution. The first one is, whereas a long record of extensive interventions promote successful outcomes for all students, an equity gap exists among Santa Barbara City College students, most notably of color. Again, the mission statement says opportunity for all students, not outcomes. So my question is, where's the factual public data that I can see to support this statement? Concern 2, whereas the Board of Trustees recognizes that discrimination, bias, racist incidents negatively affect the mental health and in turn the academic outcomes of students of color. Again, where's the factual information? Where can I go and see something that can prove this statement?
And again, the 2019 board goals already say that making available comprehensive mental health services for all students is an important goal. It's already covered. Concern 3, now therefore be it resolved, the board stands firmly against bigotry, prejudice, discrimination, inequity in all forms, both institutional and individual. This is an open-ended statement or a personal opinion, okay? So it's not bounded or grounded in state or federal law. It's just an open-ended statement. So I don't know how that could be made and put in a resolution from a board of a public institution. Lastly, concern number 4, there's words, restorative and intersectional anti-racism plan. These terms I can't find. They're not defined or incorporated into the SBCC mission statement or any existing policy. They're not there. So you have to define them, I would submit, before you can just put them in a board resolution. The last one that I found, by the way, is 2017, so there's not many of them. Lastly, I cannot find any public data or reports that demonstrates that SBCC students were deprived of access to educational services based on ethnicity, race, national origin, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or disability. So I submit to the board, this resolution as drafted is irresponsible, and until it can be backed up by publicly available reports that we can all see, you cannot pass this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Denise Adams.
Thank you again, trustees, for listening to me. Denise Adams, resident of the community for 39 years, involved with the college. I have several questions, and I would like to underscore what the past speakers said to you. I highly recommend that you not proceed with this resolution at this point in time. We have much going on at the college, and I think there'll be many more facts disclosed at a better point in time. It would be more beneficial. You heard from legal counsel at the last meeting the difference between lawful and unlawful, and I think we all need to heed the presentation that we heard from legal counsel. I wanted to first ask you where the draft resolution originated from. People who are watching this on television would like to know. I've been asked, I've received several text messages, who proposed it, who wrote it? Were the students involved in this transaction? Did this go before the student government for its approval? I want to start with your third point that you say here. You have written in your point 3, it says the board understands that racism exists. We have no demonstration or evidence that it exists on this campus yet. When you do have that evidence, then let's talk about this resolution. But we heard from your legal counsel, nothing unlawful has been documented. There's nothing on the record insofar as hate speech or any other incident. So point 3, I think, is going to open you up for a lot of lawsuits. So I would take pause before I proceed at this point in time. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. Just pause until you have your evidence. I also want to ask you if you have considered the legal ramifications of doing a resolution without evidence, because if anything's not true, then you set yourself up. May I, on that note, suggest that you do an anonymous survey of your faculty, your staff, and your students, anonymous. Get information, do a study. I'd like to know, we all want to know, because we don't want any racism on the campus, and whatever there may be, we want it identified, quantified, and we want to resolve it. So if we could do a survey, that would be helpful. Your point 4 says that we psychologically, as our core principle, we want to be psychologically and physically supportive. The purpose of this college is to give students an opportunity to learn. I'm a graduate of a community college. I was poor. I can tell you where it gets you. I can tell you, having been yesterday at Chatsworth High School in the San Fernando Valley, where it got 1,004 of my classmates out of that college. All of us are very successful thanks to an institution like this, and I bet 99.9% of the students at Santa Barbara City College go on to success. because we have exemplary teachers, staff, faculty. So let's find out where we're short, and where we come up short, we want to address that. But we're not in the business of psychological support, we're into opportunity. Your point number 5, that we define an equity gap. We have no proof of any equity gap. There's no equity gap. The equity gap happens at Santa Barbara Unified School District, where we know one exists. We can quantify by each elementary school based on their ethnicity where the gaps exist, and they feed into this institution. This institution doesn't create an equity gap. This institution closes the equity gap. We have done a phenomenal job, as quantified by the Aspen Institute when we became the #1 college in the nation. So this institution, the faculty, we've done an exemplary job here. So we take issue with your point number 5. Point number 6 is that the trustees recognize discrimination here. How can you recognize it if it's not quantified? Again, we just want to know what you know that we don't know.
1 minute
and you go
remaining.
on to say that the mental health affects academic achievement. Again, I majored in this subject, and I was married to the head of Santa Barbara County Mental Health for years. I don't understand where you come off with a statement like that, your mental health affects it. Usually it makes you stronger, because you're going to prove people wrong, beat them at their own game. If somebody says you can't do something, what do you come back? You say, I'm going to come back and beat them. I'm going to prove them wrong. So some of your statements here are unfounded. Again, all I ask, take pause. Let's find out. When we have an issue, let's address it. We're on the same team, and we want to ensure that this goes before the Student Senate, and that the groups involved are every person on this campus, every staff, every faculty, and certainly every student. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Abboud.
Mr. Chair, I was going to ask if there's anybody else who wants to speak on this. We want to be as inclusive as possible in getting input in the drafting of this, so I'd like to see if we could open it up, because we're almost done with the meeting, and it'd be great to hear more from the public.
I'd like to support the order that you have put in place, and I noticed that you closed off public comment at the beginning of the meeting, which is in line with an order meeting, so I appreciate you doing that, Trustee Miller. So let's proceed with the discussion for the board.
I think we need to proceed. We've said very clearly at prior meetings that we request that speaker slips be submitted ahead of time, yet we continue to receive requests by dropping off speaker slips in the middle of the public comment, in the middle of the item being discussed, so I think we should move on. I would ask the authors of the resolution, Trustee Parker, Trustee Abboud, whether you have any comments you'd like to make.
Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. Yes, as the board remembers, I called for this resolution to come forward at the February 14th meeting, at which point I notified Trustee President Miller and Superintendent Beebe and Jonathan, Trustee Abboud, that it'd be great to get to work on it. I did do some initial scratching out based on what I've seen at other colleges, because this is an issue that colleges across the country have been grappling with. So it was lovely to be able to go out and see what other colleges have been doing. We did get input from Trustee Igbechi and from a number of members of the of faculty, both by email and then after the first go-round. And then based on board comments at the last meeting, President Beebe jumped in, Ms. Stark chimed in on the shared governance piece, and then Dr. Benjamin asked that, that we bring it back as a draft, and that she then take it back and do the more formal shared governance process, so that the groups and committees that normally look at the work that we present have a chance to give input before we take final action. So that's kind of the process. I think that most of you will recognize, especially on the board, that a lot of the language from the board in this resolution is from board documents like this, or school documents like the student equity plan, for example, the board's principles, core principles, and anything that is not is from peer-reviewed work, for example, on mental health issues and how that affects student outcomes. One of the ones that I wanted to talk, or one of the changes that I wanted to point out is you'll see that there's a big change in the resolutions in terms of shared governance and who's responsible for what. It makes it really clear that it's going to be the superintendent president that moves forward with working with constituent groups on any anti-racism plan. One of the whereases that was mentioned in public comment was one that Dr. Beebe felt very strongly needed to be brought in, and that is the racism whereas, number 3. And I will let him address that in just a moment, but I wanted to take a moment to talk about it as well, because it acknowledges racism in the nation and in this state and at institutions of higher learning, and a quick Google search will show that this comes up again and again. And then it addresses it here at City College. And it's worded very broadly, so you can be looking at it in terms of the individual events that we have been grappling with for a number of months, whether or not they rose to the level of criminality or discipline. They were still incidents that created disruption and harm on campus. And so you can look at it through that lens, but it also includes the lens of structural or institutional racism. And I want to talk about that for just a moment, because I think a lot of people on this campus and in the community don't necessarily have experience with that. And I've had experience working through it at Santa Barbara Unified, so I just want to share a couple of stories from there. Structural or institutional racism is often unintentional. It's a perpetuation of past practices that can harm student outcomes, and we've seen that harm in students at Santa Barbara City College, for example, but we also saw it at Santa Barbara Unified. Pretty much any educational institution for students of any age grapples with it. It can be hidden in the admission process of a four-year college and in the gifted education policies of an elementary school district. So my 2 quick examples at Santa Barbara Unified were I'm just going to touch on student discipline and English learner status. Student discipline, the state required that K-12 schools look at how we discipline students and who's being disciplined. And when you looked at our district, we could see, when you did that level of analysis, we could see that it was our Latino students that were being disproportionately subject to our disciplinary system. It was one of the very important reasons why we brought in a restorative approaches, restorative justice, disciplinary model and did extensive training so that we could change the numbers not just around the edges, but significantly and through the core of our disciplinary program. That was institutional racism. None of us intended it. It was not anything that anybody was specifically doing. It was simply carrying on old practices without reflection and analysis. Another was English learner status. We had so many students that were coming in labeled as English learners as kindergartners that were then still English learners when they graduated from high school. And to be honest, the district was, we knew that our categories, our criteria for transitioning kids to be relabeled as English proficient, that they were higher than other districts. But we thought that that was a good thing because it meant that we had more support available for these students without doing the analysis of understanding that these students were then blocked from college prep and advanced classes in our high schools. They were then blocked from applying to four-year colleges because, yes, they could come to Santa Barbara City College, but they did not have the English classes credit that they needed to go on to a four-year institution directly from high school. Completely unintentional. The district thought it was doing a good job by these students by making sure that they had support through it without understanding the unintended consequences. And with that, a few years ago, we made a significant change in our English learner reclassification process, and it's made a huge, huge difference for students and for student outcomes and for families. And that is the type of thing, when we're talking about institutional racism, I know that SVCC knows it's happening here because you grapple with it through your student equity plan. And so it's not as if this is new to this institution. It's been here. There is a recognition of it, at least on part of some of the staff and faculty here. I don't know, as a new person on this board, I don't know enough about where you need to be looking at institutional racism. And a lot of times it can be so hidden it's insidious. But it's not something that is unique to City College. It's happening at every institution. It really is. And so this just notes that and notes that we have work to do both on an individual level, but also on a college-wide level. And with that, Dr. Beebe, I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to add about why it was that you brought this whereas forward and felt that it was important to include.
Well, you covered it pretty well. I don't know if I can add a lot to that. Just a couple nuances that I want to suggest. First one is that I don't believe the college is a racist institution. That's different than there's racism that exists in the institution. And as you point out very accurately, racism exists in the country and the state in many, if not all, systems of higher learning. Some people could attribute that to individuals. I'm proposing that the structures that you described, the examples that you described are systemic and institutional and not directed at an individual or not specific to an individual, although an individual can have racist behavior. I'm not talking about the individual. I'm talking about the college overall. You brought up a fact that is something that, and I happen to read the study myself, that students of color in K-12 are suspended at a much higher rate than Caucasian children. That's one example of institutional racism in the K-12 level, not here. I mean, that's established in research. But that's an example of this. My point here is that if this resolution is about overcoming racism in the institution, that we need to first acknowledge it in the nation, in the state, in higher education, and in the institution. Or, I mean, that seems like the core and the foundation of any resolution that we'd want to move forward with relative to this topic. That's about it.
Any other comments? Trustee Haslam.
Yes, I'm really grateful for the conversation, and I'm grateful to the two of you for bringing this to us. I think I'm less concerned with what passes than with having the conversation. I frankly would be surprised if there weren't institutional racism of the sort that Kate suggested or that Anthony suggested, because it's endemic to our society, to our country, to our state, and to other institutions, and that we don't know about it, that we can't put our finger on it, is probably an indication of the level of insidious proportion that is characterized by it. So I think the conversation is wonderful. I think the wider the conversation, the better. So I'm not in a hurry to get to conclusion, because what happens to resolutions, folks, is we vote for them and then they're forgotten. I'm much more inclined to continue the conversation for the duration so that we actually get it, rather than just have a brief scenario and then set it aside and move ahead as if we didn't have the conversation.
Trustee Aboud?
So luckily we did, I think we felt the same way, that resolutions could be sometimes just a resolution. And that's why in this resolution, there's an outcome attached to it that, we pass it, then there's another outcome, and then there's reports on that outcome. So the intention is not for this to be one that goes on a shelf or on our website as a link. And then,
I understand that.
Yeah, but that's a valid concern, though. What I want to do, a couple things. So first, I want to read what the ACLU has to say about equal opportunity in education. Thank you for Darcel sending me this. So the question is, it's on our FAQ, ACLU, major organization. I think most people can recognize them as a respected group on many of these topics. And nonpartisan, doesn't really fall, just is pro free speech, is pro equal opportunity, civil rights for all. So how does the ACLU propose to ensure equal opportunity in education? Answer. Universities are obligated to create an environment that fosters tolerance and mutual respect among members of the campus community, an environment in which all students can exercise their right to participate meaningfully in campus life without being subject to discrimination. To advance these values, campus administrators should, the first one is the one that's most relevant, speak out loudly and clearly against expressions of racist, sexist, homophobic, and transphobic speech, as well as other instances of discrimination against marginalized individuals and groups. That's the first basic thing that we can do. So there's way more we can do to ensure equal opportunity in education, but a really basic one, a really easy one, is to say that we're anti-racist. And another thing I want to note is that this resolution is intentionally written to be anti-racist and not just any other word. Usually sometimes you might say, we're pro-tolerance or we're pro-acceptance of everybody or anything of that flavor, but anti-racist is a really intentional position because it's not enough to just be okay with other people of different race or sex, but we need to be actively anti-racist because racism is something we need to extinguish from our institution. So that was the intention of naming it specifically that way. I wanted to clarify it. And then I wanted to also clear up one of the questions we had last time. I know it's going to go to the groups for comment, and I think it could become even better than what we ended up with, but I think we did come up with a great way to balance, that this is supposed to be focused on anti-racism, but there are, of course, many other forms of oppression that exist that we need to be dealing with. And so what we ended up rewriting is an anti-racism plan that's comprehensive, restorative, and intersectional. So comprehensive meaning it touches all areas of the campus, all areas of the experience here. Restorative in that, we've had some issues and any action should be focused on healing as well. And then intersectional in terms of looking at how race and sex intersect and how racism can affect women differently than men, or how racism can affect people from the LGBTQ community differently than straight people. So that's the purpose of adding those adjectives to what the plan should look like. And I think that's really important because you could even look at those as categories in the plan of how are we comprehensive, how are we restorative, how are we intersectional, which is what's going to come back for us to adopt. So I wanted to clarify those things. Kate said it all better than I could, so thank you for that, and I hope we can have a good discussion today, and Helen will come back to us with it in April 11th to pass or to consider.
Trustee Kroninger.
Well, like Peter, I appreciate the conversation, and I appreciate that we are hopefully going to have a long conversation from time to time about these issues. I'm deeply uncomfortable with the resolution as written. The examples you're giving, Kate, do not pertain, they pertain to K-12. They don't fit this institution. I do not deny that this institution may have its own issues or examples, but they have not been determined. We are listing whereases for which there is literally no evidence, and I am totally uncomfortable with that. I cannot support that approach. I also think that it is important that we have legal review of a resolution of this importance. It has consequences when we appear to declare something as a fact. I don't think we have evidence for a number of the statements here. And I also feel, as I said last time, that we have not followed the process, both in generating this draft and in, I think we're making some better steps forward in bringing it to the campus for participatory governance, but April 11th is far too soon. We had a discussion with regard to board policies, which covered even the most minor changes, and the request was at least 60 days, and that's what our board policy is. This kind of a resolution is serious enough and complex enough that it should get that kind of consideration. I just don't see how you can do it by April 11th and with a spring break as well. So I would say that. I think we as board members can speak to what we should do as board members, our role, our responsibilities, our own speech, as we speak from this podium and other places. I think we should, as you have proposed, allow the college to develop a plan. We do not direct that. We ask for a plan. Rather than try to get deeply into all of the specific issues, because really it is going to go out to our participatory governance groups, I tried to put down for myself and for all of us my views of what I think we should be saying about this. I'm attempting to address the issues we've been talking about, to limit our statements of whereases to things that I feel are fully supported. Express the support of the board for the college in coming to terms with these issues. And also, as I just mentioned, direct our own work to move forward and understand our roles and how we can best help the college succeed in these regards. So what I'm going to do is pass out to you the way I structured this. I feel like what I'm looking at on this agenda is pretty negative. I've tried to come at it from a more positive perspective. And I'm going to pass it out to the board members. Angie has copies at her desk for those in the public who would like to have a copy. I have asked that it be on the March 28th agenda, this version for discussion, so that the public has a fully noticed time period to review it and bring whatever comments as well they may have. And I don't expect discussion here today because you really can't hand something out and expect people to read it and discuss it. But I thought that it would be worth having in your hands. It has been shared with Dr. Beebe, Trustee Miller, our president, and with Dr. Benjamin, and that's it.
Trustee Nielsen.
I've been out of town and busy on the college at a conference, and this first came briefly to my attention very late on Tuesday night, and I had until to really read and understand this revised resolution. I really didn't get a good chance to actually read it and try to think on it until this morning, and I want more time to be able to address it more thoroughly. However, I would like to share at this time at least my initial reactions to it. I really, as I read through, I thought about duplicative and redundant to our mission statement and our vision statement. Now, I'm not condemning it. I think we need to address these issues. These are national issues. They're not just here, and they're not worse here than someplace else. They're not necessarily better either. But there are certainly areas of the country that I've personally experienced where the conditions are worse.
but it probably exists here to one degree or another. But this kind of, the wording that's used here, kind of, and these matters that have been brought to us over the past few months, it bothers me that none of those issues are truly substantiated. We don't have a history of any recorded violations of such. And then I thought about something else too, because I've been and this was related, Kate brought part of it up, about the K through 12. I've been very interested in this, and it's one of the reasons why I'm on this board, why I ran for it 6 years ago. I don't like the achievement gap in the K through 12. And I've also done some research that you might want to try to do, and I didn't have enough time to find my notes to write it down so I could pass it out to you. But there's a little story, and you can find it easily if you just Google racism and you look a little bit. You'll find a whole bunch of videos started in the mid-'60s, right after Martin Luther King was assassinated. And where she divided, she taught school in a little farm town in Iowa where everybody was basically the same race, same color. And she had these students there, and you've maybe run into this lady before. You're nodding like I've seen this. Okay, so the experiments was about brown-eyed people versus blue-eyed people. And so she put collars on the brown-eyed people in the classroom, and she divided them up, and she put these collars on half the students, and she told them that the other half, you have to read the videos or read the book. She told the other half of the students that they were smarter. And then the ones with the collars, and then she had all the kids with the collars had to sit in the back of the room, and all the kids without the collars could sit in the front. She actually did this. Then she, the next day she came in, and she told the students that she lied to them. And she asked all the brown-eyed kids to take their collars off and go put the collars on the blue-eyed kids. Now she said the truth is that all the blue-eyed kids are inferior, and so they need to trade places with the kids in the back, and they all need to go to the back of the room. And I'm oversimplifying this, but she tested them as she did this to both groups separately, and she found out that whoever had the collars on did worse on the test than the groups that didn't, and it didn't matter which group it was if they had the collar on. So it proved that what you think will happen or what you're told will happen is oftentimes what happens. And that's a problem. And so there's a lot of understanding. There's educated people on this board, and the ones of us that may not have education in the field are trying. And we're watching, we're learning, we're researching. And I understand the concern here, but I don't like the fact of the redundancy to our mission statement. We've already said these things in our vision statement. I don't mind repeating them. I'm not comfortable at this point with a resolution of this nature. I would like to focus a resolution on a commitment to research, identify, and increase public awareness, especially among our faculty and especially students. If we could focus on that, maybe we could do something about it. We could be an example of what we do and what we're trying to do, which will probably, and if we do that in a positive way, we can have a national effect that's good, that will spur others to follow that. If we approach it in a negative way, this is just me talking. I'm not issuing orders. It's the way my mind works. If we approach it in a negative way that says we have this endemic problem, it's almost, to me, it implies that we have this, that we are guilty of something. It's the way it's worded. And we are, but it's not intentional, like you said, Kate. I want more time to really understand this. I did not see your revised resolution until actually get to understand it until this morning, and I made some quick notes, and that was all I could do in the short time I had. I also had 2 doctor's appointments today, so I didn't have much time. So what I'd like to bring this up even and continue the discussion at the next board meeting. I want more time to really look at it. I'm not anti doing a resolution, but I don't like the approach here. I just have questions about it, and I didn't know what Marcia was doing. These were just my thoughts in the couple hours I had to really look at it and what's been accumulating in my brain for a while. Thank you for your hard work.
Any other comments?
Yes.
Trustee Gallardo.
Thank you, Trustee Miller. So I concur with Trustee Nielsen and Trustee Croninger, and I am not in support of this resolution as it's written. I'm concerned more about the process and about us, well, first of all, understanding that individual trustees don't give direction to the superintendent president. So as a collective board, we can give a direction for something that will require such substantial work and that will require staff time. So having said that, I have to reflect on that we have had issues come up to the board that have highlighted some institutional system that we have had that would have had a negative effect on some population of student. And what I specifically recall was when the issue was brought to us where our classified staff could no longer teach a faculty class. And so when that issue was brought up to us, we worked through our then superintendent president, Dr. Gaskin. And without the board getting involved, without a resolution, with the time and the support of the superintendent president, we were able to continue a program which I believe just got an award from the Chancellor's Office, that the EOPS director just emailed us that our transitions program was awarded. Okay, that was a program that would have been negatively impacted by some decision, but our classified staff was able to work together, brought it to the board, and we kicked it back to our superintendent president. That is our process, because we don't meddle in the institution. And with the trust and the relationship we had with our president, that got taken care of. Years later, we still have running START up and running, transitions, and it just got an award. And so that is the main reason why I feel that I want to yield continued trust and autonomy to Dr. Benjamin to carry on this work. Should she feel that this needs to come to us or she makes a recommendation, then at that point I will take her recommendation. But I am hiring her to run this institution, and I trust that she will hit the ground running and do what she needs to do, and I am not comfortable with her on her first day job giving her a task as monumental as this one, not until she comes to us telling us it's needed, and we will fully support her.
Trustee Abboud.
Kate had her hand up first.
Trustee Parker.
Thank you. Just in terms of the process, because I feel like Trustee Croninger, you in particular have been focused on the shared governance piece. I personally, at this point, would probably feel more comfortable taking this and just handing both off to the superintendent president and having our various constituent groups look at them with him the way. I think that would be a more standard process.
I'm not disagreeing with you in terms of handing it off for people to start to work with. What I am suggesting, though, is that the public didn't have their time to get the notice to see what was being put forth, and they may have comments, they may not have comments, but that's the process that we would normally use.
Should we get those comments, though, after members of the college community have weighed in?
Both.
Or
Both, I think. It's both. I mean, given particularly that we have started, for whatever reason, we have started here. You know, if it had not started here, I would agree with you. But having started it here, it seems like the process should be the same in both instances.
Well, I would ask that we defer, because at March 28th, Dr. Benjamin won't be here yet, right? She will not be at that meeting. I mean, I would ask that we defer to the April 11th meeting to have this discussion, just because I think it's so important that she be present. Would that be?
I don't have a problem. Well, the problem I had was the idea that we would come back for a decision on April 11th, simply because I think that's impractical for our governance groups to deal with. I mean, it is a complex process. They frequently send, Academic Senate, for example, discusses things, sends it out to each department for further discussion, gets back the results of that. That does not happen in between now and April 11th.
Yeah, I think it'd be better, frankly, if we wait till April 11th when she's here.
Let me just have a couple comments. Number one, I want to thank Trustee Parker and Trustee Abboud for the process they've gone through to get this resolution to us. They had one draft, which I know that you reached out to Dr. Benjamin, you talked to Dr. Beebe, you had some revisions made, and you brought a new draft to us. And I think we need to, because Dr. Benjamin isn't here yet, as we've talked about, it's going to be, I think, very difficult for her to go through the process that she'd like to go through, as I understand it, when she starts on April 1, to be able to come to another draft before the board on April 11th. She's expressed a strong desire, which I think she shared with both of you, that she wants to consult with the various constituent groups on campus, and I think that's going to be very difficult for her to do between April 1 and April 11th. So I do think it's going to be a stretch for us to get to a product that we can have a final vote on April 11th.
No, and I would expect that she wouldn't have even, starting April 1st, she wouldn't have been able to go to the constituent groups. She may just want to give us an update rather than us doing any sort of review at that point. I mean, I think it'd be great for us to have it generally on the agenda, but not with any expectation that it's ready for any kind of action.
I would just, Trustee Miller, well, actually, all of us, board, I would just remind the board of, we've learned. So we have one employee, we have one superintendent president, and I think that we've left a number of board meetings, both with Dr. Gaskin and Dr. Beebe, where we were like, shoot, did we not protect the time of the superintendent president like we should have? Did we not delegate him or her to run the institution? And I would prefer Dr. Benjamin walk on her first day on this job for her to lay out what she thinks. She may think the exact same thing. I don't know what she thinks.
I mean, I know that she thinks this is critically important.
And most people think something, and then they walk into a deficit, and they realize, gosh, I really wanted to get the adult learning going, but I'm going to address the budget, and that was Dr. Beebe's priority. She's not here yet, but my priority is to support her and to protect her time. And I am not going to give her direction on her first day on a method that I feel that she needs to go about to address something she's still learning about. And so I would ask the board to respect her time, let her tell us when this needs to come back, how it needs to come back, and let her set that timeline. She deserves that respect, and Dr. Beebe and her deserve the time for transition, and I strongly encourage you guys to protect their time. That job is not easy, it is difficult, and this transition is difficult for our community, for our students, for our faculty, for everybody that is counting on us to fulfill and protect that mission. And I think that as a board, with our only employee, that is the responsibility we have, is to protect their time.
Let me just say, I generally agree with what you're saying, although let me add that I know from my own discussions with Dr. Benjamin that she intends to give a very high priority to this issue and is very focused on giving priority to that when she begins. So I think she would, I can't speak for her, but I think she would tell you it's near the top of her list of her to-do list for when she starts on April 1. Trustee Haslam.
Well, as the one who suggested that there's value in having this conversation, I'd also like to stress that we don't need to have it all at once. And I'd like us to return to the agenda because we have 8.3 is a 5-year fiscal projection, and I'm really interested in looking at that, and that's going to take some time.
And just before we move on, I just want to say something, if that's okay.
Yes, Trustee Abeshi.
I would just love to address the fact that someone said the physiological and physical supportive environment is not that important to student success. We've had students go through a lot of mental health issues here on campus, and I think it affects their mental health. We've had students commit suicide, and I don't think when someone commits suicide, the person has a chance to be successful. So I think mental health is very important to our students, and it's something we should be taking very, very thoroughly, and we should also support our mental health services on campus. Also, concerning the resolution, I'm very surprised that this is having like so much back and forth in terms of support and not supporting it. I think what we should all strive for is making SBCC a very inclusive environment. Students shouldn't come to campus trying to use the library PCs and being called security upon them. I think it's important that we all try to take a firm stand as a board. We are the highest policymakers for SBCC. I think it's important that we all say, this is what is happening in America, but it shouldn't happen here on our campus. We can't control what happens outside of this campus, but we can control what happens here. And I think the board taking a firm decision that racism isn't welcomed here. Whether in the past or in the near future, we shouldn't allow racism come into our campus. So whether there are facts to support it now that pride is racism or not, it is important that we take a stand now and not wait for when the building is on fire and then we say, oh, we see the building is on fire, we should call the fire department. It's important that we take preventive measures to stop racism and bigotry in our campus. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Abud.
I just want to add a couple more things. I think there's a gross misunderstanding of what a resolution is and how it works. And I think that if someone wants to know what racism looks like in politics and in an elected official, you could look to my side because, and I know I'm not supposed to do this as a board member, but attacks on something so simple of like, we don't need something like this, I would have taken constructive criticism. And Marcia, in terms of process, bringing a sheet of paper to a board meeting is not the right process.
Well, that's what you did.
Okay.
I didn't. No, actually, what I did
Hold
is,
on, we're gonna-
and it's not what I did.
Okay,
what
let's-
happened was.
Can we get a point of order, please?
Yes, let's move on, please. Is there a discussion
No,
about
I
this?
would like to clarify the process.
I'd like to call the question on this discussion.
There's no question to call. Let's move on.
I'd like to move on to Agenda Item 8, which are two sabbatical outcome reports. We're going to hear one tonight from Melanie O'Connor, the one from Joy Coons. Ms. Coons was not able to join us this evening, but we will proceed to hear the sabbatical outcome presentation from Ellen O'Connor.
How are you? Good evening. Nice to see all of you. Dr. Beebe and members of the Board of Trustees, I want to thank you for the opportunity to discuss my sabbatical project. This was a project I did last spring. And the project that I worked on was looking at improving our ESL FIT program. This is a program that we started a while back in response to some issues that I saw that I wanted to see if we could make a difference in. So just quickly, a little bit of background to give you some context. The Department County of Health and Santa Barbara City College, some statistics around diabetes. In the general population, diabetes is seen in about 1 out of 3 adults. In the Latino population, it's 1 out of 2 adults. So Latino adults are twice as likely to develop type 2 diabetes as their counterparts. In Santa Barbara County, where 45% of the residents identify as Latino Hispanic, and in the Santa Barbara City College community, that's 39% of our students identify as Latino Hispanic. So this is an issue that affects many, many, many of our students and affects, obviously, their families. So some contributing factors, these are things you see all the time in the news, lack of exercise, diet, smoking, these kinds of things are fairly general. The Santa Barbara County Department of Health has looked at some things that are more specific to this area, including difficulty finding time to prepare healthy meals and time for exercise for working parents, looking at a lack of knowledge around healthy dietary programs and appropriate exercise, and then, of course, limited funds for groceries, healthy foods, unsafe neighborhoods. So it was in the area of knowledge that I felt that we might be able to make a difference. And with the students that we have here at Santa Barbara City College, could we create some programming that really identified the knowledge that students need in order to reduce their risk of diabetes? So the first approach that I took was in fall of 2014. So we created a program, we called it ESL FIT. I didn't really know what else to call it, so that's what we called it. The goal was to provide bilingual health and fitness education for English language learners in our ESL credit program. And I taught the class, and I am not bilingual. Mi español es muy malo. So we had 2 classes, PE 277A and B. What I was interested in doing was to address our strategic goals around building and enhancing programs that advance student equity, access, and success across all of our subgroups. So this was really where my attention was focused. So my sabbatical was about really immersing myself in the ESL program and finding out much more about how ESL students learn on the campus in terms of the courses, what they're exposed to, what their experience is, and how we might be able to address that. So I went to 15 different ESL classes. And so if you're familiar with the ESL program, you probably know that students are either Monday, Wednesday students, or they're Tuesday, Thursday students, or they're either evening students or they're morning students, but they don't attend during all those times. So I went to all those classes. I learned a ton. I just was really a great experience. I also conducted a survey looking at, I was interested in identifying barriers to participation, and I was also interested in student experience. So we had about 67 students that responded. 71% were native Spanish speakers, 2/3 female, and about 1/3 male. So what I found from these class observations was really interesting. So first of all, we have excellent, excellent instruction in our ESL program, and that was very clear. So I really enjoyed going to the classes, very different styles of teaching, all of them very effective. Students in every single class, level 1 through 5, all use a workbook so that are appropriate to the level that they're reading and writing at. But what was so interesting was to hear the student stories that they were writing about and reading about, and it gave me a window into their hopes, their goals, their activities. Really fascinating. So what I did learn also is that the students they're outstanding learners in terms of, they're so driven in terms of English language proficiency. And so looking at learning and skill development, very, very strong interest in that. But what I also found was that there's a tremendous diversity in the formal education that students come to our ESL program. Many had had no formal education. Some had had more formal education. And so that was really a kind of an eye-opener for me and gave me a lot of perspective about how we might approach the work that we're doing. One thing that was true is every single student in every single class had a smartphone. So, to me, that means that there may be some opportunities to increase participation and habits through the use of technology. And right now, that technology doesn't exist, at least not in Spanish language. So what did I learn? So health is very important to our students. About 95% indicated that that was something of great importance. But trying to add a non-language course into their schedule was extremely challenging. Most of the students that I spoke to were working parents, many working 2 jobs, many working graveyard shifts. I was just amazed at the number of students that work graveyard shifts. They bring their kids to school in the morning, and then they come to City College to take classes. We have one ESL class that starts at 8 o'clock at night. It goes till 10 o'clock, packed. So I was just so impressed with the students and in terms of what they come to this institution with. 75% did say that if we had a class that was a health and fitness class that was taught in their native language, that they would be interested in taking that class. But what we found in terms of barriers, primary barrier was not having an instructor that was bilingual. So that was the primary one. And having resources that were, I made the mistake of saying that, gee, if I take something in English and I throw it into Google Docs or Google Translate and make sure it's translated correctly, that this would be okay. And many students were illiterate in Spanish. And so they were more literate in English, but not with content. So conversationally, yes, but not disciplined content. So the number of commitments outside time is an enormous factor. And again, lack of knowledge linking dietary and exercise habits, that was really key. Many persons have just not had access to education that would allow them to have the information they need. Financial limitations, and of course, one of the things that we found was stress is huge. And the uncertainty of futures is an enormous problem. And so stress management was something that students were very interested in. So what have we done? We hired a bilingual instructor for this particular class. I am no longer teaching it. And so we hired Ronnie Santiago. Ronnie was one of our former students. He was a kinesiology student here at Santa Barbara City College, transferred to California State University at Northridge, got his master's in public health from CSUN as well. And then after CSUN, he has extensive teaching and clinical experience in health promotion, primarily in the Latinx population and primarily regarding type 2 diabetes prevention. So he's fantastic. Students love him. And of course, he's bilingual. So we were also able to create a workbook. So based on the experiences that I had, it was clear that students like to read and write about those topics as a way to practice their language skills. And so we were able to use the National Diabetes Prevention Program. They already have a 16-week program that is both in English and Spanish. I'm a big believer in don't reinvent the wheel. So we utilized that, but we added some things to it based on the survey that I did. Students are very interested in nutrition, they're very interested in weight management, they're very interested in stress management, and many did not make the connection to diabetes. And so when we looked at where diabetes fell, it was very far down on the list in terms of interests on there. We also changed the name of the program from the unfortunately named ESL Fit to our Healthy Lives. And so this was based on student survey. So I asked students if there was a program, what would you want to call it? And so the primary one that we looked at was called Vidas Sanas, and so we think that's a pretty good name for it. Students seem to like that. And then we've also developed community partnerships. So it was of interest to me to find out what else was happening in our community. How could we connect our students to work that's going on? So you might be familiar with the Sansum Diabetes Research Institute. They're doing really pioneering work in the field of type 2 diabetes research, specifically in the Latino community. So they have embarked on a study, Mil Familias. It's a 10-year research project. We will be and we are a recruitment center for them. So looking at having our students be involved in that program. And then also, we had the folks from Lilly Pharmaceuticals as one of the primary funders for the Mil Familias, as well as the Sansum Diabetes Research Institute. So they came on campus in October. This was really sort of a meet and greet. Let's get to know each other. How might we be able to work together? And so we have continued that partnership. One of the outgrowths of that partnership was we're looking at SBCC as a distribution center for a project that started a few months ago. This is called Farming for Life. Individuals that are at high risk for type 2 diabetes get a handwritten prescription from a physician. They take that prescription to the distribution center. They pick up organic vegetables, and what we're finding in a pilot study is significant weight loss, waist circumference reductions, blood pressure, all of which are linked to type 2 diabetes. So this is a program that many of our students, our City College students, will qualify for. So we're just waiting to finish off one thing. We're looking at distributing that out of the natural bowls area in the sports pavilion, which is currently not being used. So next steps, I really saw this sabbatical project as a beginning, not an end. And what we're looking to do is to develop some grant proposals, recruitment videos, workbooks to be able to give to the students, peer mentoring programs. I have a lot of students that are interested in this particular project and want to be peer mentors in terms of health and fitness. Most of them are bilingual. We're also trying to explore sort of looking at digital gyms for California community colleges to address the issue that students have around being able to have access to health and fitness content, but not having time to be able to come to a physical location. So the use of technology, I think, is something that can be very powerful and something that we're looking into. But I also think we need to start looking at our non-credit program and then also identifying coursework at the Wake Center, Schott Center, or also at the Franklin School. Franklin School, if you may know, they also have a gym there. A few years ago, they won a $100,000 grant. And so they have a facility there that I think would be really great for this particular course. So I do want to thank the faculty in the ESL, and Priscilla, I see you up there, so thank you very much. The faculty were just fantastic. And so they were open. They let me come into their classrooms. They let me talk to the students. It was really a great experience. And with that, have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? Trustee Nielsen?
Yeah, this is a subject, I was really happy when I read what you've done.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And I'm pretty familiar with the diabetes problem in Mexico, and it's socio-economic, it's cultural, the way to prevent it. It's really hard to get them to understand, and I have some young Mexican ladies that are now in places like medical school, and one of them will become a doctor in July, and in Mexico, I get to go to the graduation.
Yeah.
This kind of education, what you're doing is sorely needed.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
And appreciate it, and it's going to benefit our students, and that's what we're all here for.
Yep.
Thank you so very much. I have no criticism at all. I wish it was done 10 years ago, but we're doing it now.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Marcia, your turn.
I was just going to say, this is something I would like to thank you for taking it on as your topic, and not just for the sabbatical, but looking ahead as well, because I think it's a tremendously important part of our PE program, and thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah, when you're talking about the families and the multiple earner strategy is a strategy for many of our families to make ends meet. And, actually for a couple falls now, driving kids from the east side to classes in the evening. And I remember sharing with Dr. Beebe on a number of occasions, I'd get here early before I picked up the kids, and in pulls in the car one by one, and it's dad picking up mom, and it's little kids running around the car.
Yeah.
And our whole parking lot outside and at our main campus over there is like a night playground for like little children.
Yeah.
And when I say that kids have this connection, I mentioned this, at board meetings, the kids know of SBCC because in first grade you're learning to read, and parents are learning to read alongside their children.
Yeah.
And so what you're doing is you are changing the trajectory of families, and I love that this project is so family-centered. And we just spent the weekend at the county looking at culture proficiency schools and how we can make our schools more culturally proficient and available for all families. And one of the works that we read about works in counties where they're taking that family approach and saying that, when we're all long and gone, when faculty's not here and we're retired and our students transfer, what's still there is the family.
Yeah.
And that family unit is important, and your project just really encompasses all of that, and I think it's amazing. I think Casey Kilgore would be so happy if you piloted this at Franklin. They have Alejandra, they have the service center there, and just thankful to the ESL department. I know I've told Priscilla anytime that Casey or our local principal, especially Casey on the east side, which is who I work with closely, anytime they've brought up anything that's systemic or something that gets addressed, like Vero, and I can send an email and things just get taken care of, and you guys are just so good at taking care of this community from the kids to the parents. So I wish you could go to the next steps next semester, but I know, you guys have stuff.
Well, we're working on it, and I've worked with Casey before, actually. I was working with the Diabetes Research Center years ago, which is how they got that grant, and so I'm familiar with her. We've talked many times.
Did you get on the bike and do the Rethink Your Drink?
I did not, but we were familiar with that. Yeah, she's great.
I was on the junior league when we did that project with her.
Oh,
we were on
sweet.
the parking lots, and the kids were looking at their calorie intake and rethinking their drink.
Yeah.
Make your blender with your bike. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions? Trustee Hassel?
I just wanted to express my appreciation for your purposeful integration of a legitimate academic subject with something that's going to affect our community almost immediately. I love that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And keep supporting sabbaticals. They're great.
I just want to add one comment that physical health is not a luxury. I believe that for a long time, and I don't have any question if you did the research, you could demonstrate that physical health contributes to student success.
Oh, absolutely. And there's quite a bit of data to support that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, Helen.
Okay. We're now going to move on to item 8.3, five-year fiscal projections, and call up Lindsay Moss, our Vice President for Business Services, and James Zavos, our Controller, who are going to bring us up to date on our financial projections. And I know you're going to share with us some of the latest information on how the ever-evolving student funding formula is impacting us. So, thank you.
Good evening, President Miller, Board of Trustees, and Dr. Beebe. Happy to be here tonight to present this information. We're going to be talking about our updated five-year fiscal projections, and the timing of this coming to the board right now is right after we received the last version of the student-centered funding formula simulations. James will be talking about that in a little bit, but we just received that recently. We put together these projections as quickly as we could because it's very important for all of us to be looking at this information and talking about it, and that's why we're bringing it to you at this time. So these projections tonight, this is a newer process for us here. This is our first time with us talking about the projections and not talking about the budget. So these are our 5-year fiscal projections. We haven't gotten into budget development yet for 1920. What we're using here tonight are our 18-19 budget information, updated budget information, and then projecting out using that. Going forward, as we get into the budget process for 1920, we'll be using that information. So just keep that in mind. And also, the purpose of why we're doing it at this time is with all the changes with the new funding formula, we want to look at this information right now to frame our conversations as we go into budget development. So when we go through our BRAC processes, our budget resource allocation processes, we have an idea of what type of funds we have available to allocate during the budget development. Okay. Just a reminder, why do we do fiscal projections? It's very important for us to be looking at the revenues that we have coming in with the new student-centered funding formula. Those revenue funding streams seem to be changing dramatically and the dollar amounts are changing. So it's important for us to strategize and do this kind of work and review it as often as we possibly can every time that information is made available to us from the Chancellor's office. Also, we've been experiencing structural deficits, so we need to be able to know, how is that going? Is it getting better or worse, and so on. So that's why we've been doing this process pretty often, pretty regularly, as soon as we get information from the Chancellor's office. It's very important to remember that these numbers constantly change. This is not a budget we're talking about right now. It's just projections based on our best assumptions, and we'll talk about what types of assumptions we use as we go through this. But these will keep changing, and they change every time we go through this process based on the assumptions that we are using. Excuse me. So when we talk about our revenues, the funding formula in the past has always been based on the FTES, the full-time equivalent students that we have here on campus. That's how we've obtained our funding going forward. Since the past, going forward, it's slightly different with the new funding formula, but it's still primarily based on FTES. This is really important for everyone to understand how much our FTES has changed over the years. We had a peak back here in 09-10, almost 19,000 students, and you can see that we've declined this 23% dramatically since then. That's pure dollars for us. So when someone says, well, what's going on with the budget here at Santa Barbara City College? Why is there a deficit? It's linked to our FTES decline. The more that declines, the less revenue we have available, while our expenditures don't change as much as the revenue has been changing for us. Keep in mind that on our expense side, our salaries make up about 87% of our budget. So it's hard to make quick adjustments on the expense side. We always like to do a quick recap since the last version of projections we've talked about. The last time we did our projections was after we finished our final budget for 18-19. And at that time, that was September of 2018 when we did those fiscal projections. This is just a quick recap to kind of refresh everyone's mind of what we were talking about then, and then we'll get into what we're talking about this time around. But you can see that we had, for the 18-19 budget, this $1.5 million deficit. So that means that our expenses were higher than our revenues. And then going out into a balanced budget out in the 21-22 time period. This was based on FTES stabilization, so the number of our students stabilizing in 18-19, and then increasing 1% per year beyond that. We also had projected a base allocation increase, and then some cost savings as well. Now, what has changed since then and now? Kind of a recap. Unfortunately, our FTES has not stabilized as we had expected in that round of projections. They've actually declined about 2% in this year. And our international and out-of-state, all of our other non-resident revenues are also projecting to decline this year, and we didn't have that built into the projections last time, so we were not aware that that would take place. Also, our new funding formula continues to change. So that impacts our assumptions into this, our revenue side. Last year, we did conclude our salary negotiations. We had budgeted a appropriation for contingencies of $6.5 million to cover any type of salary increases that we were negotiating during the budget development process last year. Those have concluded, and we agreed on a 7% salary increase. So those were included in our budget, but now it's final, and we're able to continue forward with that in our projections. And then the last item that we've continued to follow the process with is the RAP process, the Workforce Reduction Through Attrition Plan, where we've received a lot of one-time savings by slowing down our hiring process and having a real clear process of which types of positions are being filled. And I'm referring specifically to classified staff and management, not faculty. It doesn't apply to that. Okay, so I'm going to pass over the next portion of the presentation to James. He's going to talk about the new funding formula, how that works, and get more into the numbers. He's really the expert on all of that. He lives and breathes all this information. I'll jump in if anything comes up that I feel I need to jump in on, and then I'm going to wrap up at the end as well. Hopefully that'll keep me from coughing you guys to death here.
All right, so like Lindsay said, I'm going to start off just really quick going back through the new funding formula. This is kind of old news. We kept it in here just to keep reiterating that this is different than the way it's been in the past. But the new funding formula does start to shift away from that pure FTES funding, which is helpful. But so we still get our base allocation, which is basically the money that comes from just our FTES. The supplemental allocation comes in for our low-income students. And the student success allocation is based on the success outcomes that our students are able to achieve. There's 8 different metrics in there. So the phasing of it, that formula was set to phase in over 3 years, starting out with a 70% in the base allocation and 10% in the student success allocation, with the remaining 20% going to that supplemental allocation. And that was intended to phase in over 3 years to ultimately land at a 60-20-20 split. In the governor's January proposal, that switched to essentially a 3-year phase-in, but phasing it in slower, where we're staying with the 70-20-10 split in 1920 and then dropping off to the 60-20-20 split in 2021. So that does slow the phase-in down. For us, as we decline in FTES, and generally do extremely well in the success metrics, that doesn't help us at all. It does hurt us a little bit. It's not a huge dollar amount, but it does make a difference, particularly as we're declining. So the student-centered funding formula revenues, just to recap, we did get in this fiscal year approximately $9.1 million in new ongoing revenue as it's being calculated. Compared to 17-18. You'll see on the next slide, we actually, with our continued FTES decline, next year we will fall back into that hold harmless provision of the funding formula, which is that we get funded based on our prior year numbers because our revenues have declined below those. So they always give you that 1 year to recover those. So our metrics for our low-income student, this is basically saying that money is going to stay the same this year rather than phasing in over the next years. And then Lindsay mentioned it, and you'll see it a couple times. This formula continues to change regularly. It seems like every time we have a presentation from the Chancellor's office on something new that comes out, they've reinterpreted the way some of the stuff in the law is written, or they've had more time to dig into it. This whole funding formula came into play extremely quickly. And the people in the Chancellor's office have been kind of trying very hard to keep up and get it all out, but it does change regularly, which is frustrating for those of us trying to guess what's going to happen next.
When you say it changes regularly, does that translate to making it predictable?
I guess.
Yeah, right.
It's predictably unpredictable.
Well,
yeah,
that's not what I meant. Are we able to project, based on what you said, that it happens with regularity? Is there anyone at the governor's office who can actually address this anomaly?
One thing they recently did that was helpful was the Chancellor's office ended up reaching out to FCMAT and having FCMAC create a simulator, a calculator for all the districts to use, that was really helpful.
Yeah.
So we're all using the same calculations to figure out what our revenues will be going forward. That's actually the next slide is a summary slide about that comes from that calculator. So that was very helpful. However, we'll get into the details about what continues to change, making this a stressful experience.
Okay, thanks.
Good question.
Yeah, so a lot of the changes are things in the way they calculate the base allocation, which is based on FTES. Rather than looking at just your current year, they're looking at a 3-year average of your FTES, which is intended to help smooth any declines or any increases. The way they've calculated those has changed in terms of what numbers they're using. They've moved it so that they pulled pieces of it out in some years and not in other years. So things like that, just reinterpreting the way the numbers are calculated is what's making some of the changes that I'm talking about. So this is a quick summary of what the simulator looks like. The simulator has 4 pages of detailed assumptions that you build into it, and it spits out a nice pretty summary. I thought I'd throw that summary up here because it does look nice. You can see how all the revenues are breaking down between the 3 different pieces of the funding formula, the base allocation, the supplemental allocation, both in dollars up at the top. And then on the bottom, I thought this was an interesting chart to look at, which is how it's breaking down in terms of a percentage of our total dollars that's coming in. So I like seeing this really kind of shows that piece that we've talked about, that student success allocation, how well we do in that area. In theory, these numbers should be in 18-19 and 19-20, 70-20-10. But you can see that we do well above that 10% mark. We're hitting the 13% mark on the student success allocations. So that does just show how well we do in that. You can see in 1920, there's the hold harmless piece right there. That is because with a decline built in for FTES, again, next year, we will, this simulator calculates that we will fall a little bit into that lower revenue next year. So we do get the same amount of revenue next year that we'll get this year.
James, sorry, can you, on the, I agree with you that we do really well, and that's why that's student success allocation, and we just heard a sabbatical report that is evident of why we do well. Can you just so that, I know I've heard it, but tell us what falls under that student success allocation, because you're saying we do well. So there's something we're doing really well, and it's evident in our budget.
So there's 8 factors built into that, and give me 1 second, I can move on to it. The 8 factors are the associate degrees we grant, associate degrees for transfers, baccalaureate degrees, which we just kind of ignore because we don't do that, credit certificates, 9 or more CTE units, transfers to 4-year universities, completing transfer level math and English within the first year of a student's existence. That's within the first fiscal year, or the first calendar year, one full year worth of terms. And that's on calendar year, not based on the student's year. So if they start in spring, they would have to do them both in spring in order to qualify for that. And then the final one is achieving a living wage, which is a hard one to measure for us. So.
Thank you, no, that's good.
I think I understand why, but could you explain why in the formula it's 70 or it's 60-20-20 at the end of it, but here it's 58-16-26? Is it because we just do way better at student success than having a more diverse student body?
Yeah. So the 60-20-20 is calculated like a system-wide. They set rates based on where they think that number is going to come from, that's going to come in, so that as a system, 60% of our funding is coming from the base allocation, the 20% coming from the supplemental allocation, and 20% from the student success. Each college is going to have their own experience, which I think is why they put this chart into the calculator, into this summary, so you can really see how much of your revenue as a percentage is coming from all the different areas.
Cool.
I just wanted to comment on that further. Because of that, the delay in the phase-in of the student success allocation part that we do well with, it actually hurts us. I mean, if more of our funding is based on FTES, which has been flat, rather than those student success factors, it works against us. So that's one of the problems.
I'm noticing a big jump. You've pointed out that they're rearranging the movement of the percentages and delaying that process, and I'm seeing a big jump between 1920 and 2021 under the student success allocation. That's significant
and
amount of money.
I'll get to that in a minute with some of the assumptions we built in. So, and then the other thing you can see right here real quick before I move on, you can see here's the 17-18 funding that we had, and here's that big jump into 18-19. And that's the implementation of the new funding formula. Because we do well, that did give us a significant, that $9.1 million we're talking about in terms of additional funding. That's ongoing, so you see that we stay at that level kind of going forward. So. Okay, on to our assumptions, revenue assumptions. This is based on the simulator that Lindsay was talking about, which basically takes all the laws in the new funding formula and puts it so that you can build some assumptions into it, and it will give you some different numbers. You can then kind of tweak those assumptions and see kind of how it comes out differently if you assume things differently. But that we are using that simulator in order to get all of our state revenue, everything else. We try and keep our assumptions as simple as possible. And change as little as possible where reasonable. We only want to change things in a way that we know something's going to happen, or we're trying to affect a change in something. So the first assumption, which is probably one of the most important assumptions, we still do get funded almost, the majority of it does come from FTES. So we are assuming that we will continue to decline next year. Everything has shown us that we keep working to try and stabilize that decline. It just hasn't quite stabilized yet, so I suggested we build in at least one more year of a decline into these. And then we'll work on stabilizing and restoring our FTES from there, going up at about 1% a year. I'll put this up in actual numbers in a minute.
President Miller, if I may ask a quick question on that. I was at a presentation last week by Alan Hancock where they were talking about their promise. And one of the big successes that they saw of their promise was that students, particularly from Santa Ynez Valley High School, were going to Alan Hancock instead of coming to City College. And that is great for Alan Hancock. And it's great for any community that does that. But as each of our community college districts start to focus on the promise more, it will hold students in their home district. And so I wasn't sure, I wanted to touch base on that growth of 1% for California residents, just because I was wondering if you'd factor that in.
It's difficult to figure out exactly how to factor that in. That is one of the points I was going to make, is that it's important that we actually work to achieve those numbers in some way, working to capture more of our local residents, other residents around. Yes, that is actually one of the things that I've heard, not just in our area, but in other areas all over, where they're holding their local students with promise programs, essentially, local promise programs.
Is there anything in our application data that supports our assumptions, or are we just doing our best to make some assumptions?
It's too early to have any application data for next year at this point. Students don't start registering until May, so anything going into next year is always a challenge until we get much further into the year.
Trustee Nielsen?
Yeah, what Kate just said about and the point you were just discussing, there's also longer-term projections that say it could go the other way too, or that there may be relatively little change. Because as the number of high school graduates decreases, which is projected, the colleges aren't going to be able to offer everything and so they're going to tend to specialize, and that student population is still going to be engendered to some degree to move to get the specific classes or field that they want to study in. So it could be just a flat effect that's counterbalanced, and it won't make an overall difference. I don't know which is right. I just was exposed to the other point of view recently, so thought I'd share it.
Are you referring to like the reports we got on just birth rates and overall declining?
Yeah.
Yeah.
President Beebe?
One of the real factors here that is hard to quantify and predict is the continued expansion of the economy. With the growth of the economy, we know that unemployment rate is smaller, and when the growth slows down, we know that that unemployment rate will increase and more students will come to the college to get trained up, skilled up, trained to begin with, or whatever. And so that's a factor that we haven't been able to capture in here because it's just so unknown and difficult to project. But, I mean, this growth expansion period can't go on forever. So it's, I mean, that could be part of the restorative piece that you've baked in at only 1%, which is conservative, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so that is always a factor. Every presentation we go to at the state level, they do talk that at some point this expansion, which I believe is one of the longest expansions in state history, is going to contract at least a little bit. And when that happens, we do know that more students do come back to school.
And just one last comment, the Treasury Department in the state of California has also been receiving pretty consistently fewer and fewer revenues from taxes across the state. So, that could be an indication that we may be on the cusp of a downturn, but, who knows?
But of course, that then raises the question of a deficit factor, which is something mentioned on the last page.
Yes.
Yes.
And our revenues get hit with that.
Okay. So, yeah, we will get to that. Another assumption we do have, our non-credit program, the School of Extended Learning, that is continuing to grow year over year. COLA revenues are not included in the projection, so if you paid attention to the January proposal from the governor, there's a 3.46% COLA in this. We don't put that in the projections at all in the revenues. There's also projections for a couple years out in terms of COLA. We don't put that in here. We also don't put anything in on the expenditure side with that assumption. So if we put it in on just the revenue side and don't do anything with it on the expenditure side, it ends up making it look like we're growing in a lot of revenue and we're not really thinking on the expenditure side. So it's a lot more accurate to just actually leave that piece out, knowing that if it comes in, then there will likely be some expenditures that are offsetting the money that's coming in there that we're not factoring in. So the next assumption we have here, the international revenues will continue to decline this year, as Lindsay mentioned, and will begin to restore in 1920 through 21-22. When you see the percentages, keep in mind that those are percentages on a very small number of students. So the percentages look big, but they're actually very few students in each year in that. Out-of-state tuition revenues, we're assuming will continue to decline over the next couple of years, and then we'll hopefully begin to restore a little bit in 2021 and 20 through 22-23. Shot and Wake Center status funding remains flat at $927 for Shot and $1.2 for Wake. And this year, in the current year, we built in transfer in from the School of Extended Learning funds. This is the last year we're transferring over the old funds that had been transferred over to start the school, the Center for Lifelong Learning. But now we're done with those transfers in this year, so you'll see that on the transfer slide. The transfers in will go down in future years. So looking at the FTES projections in terms of numbers, you can see that the 18-19 year that we're in, we're expecting our credit resident FTES to go down about 2% compared to last year. The non-credit enhanced, which is our CDCP classes, that's going down a little bit. We're increasing as the School of Extended Learning basically come up to full speed. That's why that 52% increase is in there. That has been just that huge effort to get that all back up and running. And then the out-of-state and international, you can see both of those declining about 6% each this year. And then going forward, going down 1% and then kind of trying to restore. And that's really what it is restoring back up to previous FTES levels.
So I don't have a problem with this happening, but how are we going to go from -6% out of state to +5%? How would that happen?
So again, remember the numbers, 5% is a very, very small number.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it's less than 100 students. Our international office is working to reach out to students in other countries, working with partners in those countries. So they do have a plan in order to grow those number of students. So that is kind of their goal.
Thank you.
So, so anyway, so that's kind of the numbers for what I've already talked through. So vision for success assumptions, these are basically the assumptions for all the other factors. We do see that when we decline in students, we do start to see declines in some of these other areas. So they're not perfectly mapping with the assumptions for FTES, but they are declining and then kind of increasing as we have more students. It's kind of, if you have less students, you're going to give less degrees. If you have less students, you're going to have less low-income students, kind of an idea. There's two that kind of stand out as a little different here. The associate degrees for transfer, we're adding more of those types of degrees, so we should see more students. That's why those numbers are in there. Currently, we give out about 500 of those in a year, so adding more programs that are in that area should see that continuing to grow going forward. Transfer level math and English might be a little aspirational, but with AB 705, thank you. Sorry, I've been looking at a lot of numbers. With that coming in and going online, we should have significantly more students in the transfer level math and English classes. And I know that there's a lot of efforts being made in order to make sure that those students are successful. So we're hopeful that that will lead to some growth in this area. And the rest of these are just a best guess estimate to put something in there to move the numbers around a little bit. Okay. Expenditure assumptions, again, this is very, very much, we change as little as possible on this side too. So we do know that CalPERS and CalSTRS will continue to grow. We did build in the governor's proposal to contribute to CalSTRS and stabilize the rate for us. I believe that's the next slide to see what that looks like. But that does help us where instead of going up higher rates, we're going up to 17.1 and 18.1 rather than 18.1 and 19.1. So that contribution would be very, very significant and very helpful for us. CalPERS, we're not seeing any sort of relief on that area. These numbers are pretty similar to what we've been seeing going back. They've occasionally come in a little lower than this, so hopefully over the next couple months, we'll be able to figure out exactly what that rate's going to be. I'm hopeful it'll be a little bit lower, but we'll see. Hourly budgets, with the increases in the minimum wage the last couple of years, we've held everything steady in terms of the budgets and actually asked people to try and decrease their budgets while the cost was going up. That's becoming not exactly sustainable. So we built something in as a 4% increase each year. It works out to about $100,000 a year, just to try and help departments that are relying on student and hourly workers in order to still keep about the same number of hours. Health and welfare, we know that generally goes up about somewhere between 2 to 3, 4% every year. So we put a 2% increase in there, just knowing that that's likely to go up. Contract expenditures will increase 10% next year and then 5% going forward. That's to There's some efforts in terms of marketing in there. There's also the idea that every year there's contracts that go up. Our IT department, there's automatic escalators built into a lot of our large service agreements. So every year that number does go up. So that's fairly reasonable. Utilities typically go up anywhere from 1 to 2% any given year. Marcia?
James, on the contract expenditure increase, it mentions to cover FTES restoration efforts. Can you or Dr. Beebe maybe tell us a little more about that? Because I know it's illegal for us to recruit from other community college districts unless the superintendent, president, that district agrees that we can recruit there. So I'm assuming that's not part of it. What are we doing?
So some of that's in the shared marketing fees we pay is within international students. We do pay a small share of whatever revenue comes in on that for any students who come. So we know that that's going to need to go
Can you
up.
get closer to the mic? Because I don't think the audience probably can hear you.
So some of that's in shared marketing fees with international students. We do know that there's education fairs that people go to, things along those lines. I don't know if
It's a hot button with the community to recruit out of state or elsewhere. Some members of the community.
Right, right. You know, the other effort that we're working on here too is making sure that people are aware of the Promise program. And, you know, frankly, I think that those are efforts that I think we could beef up further in terms of our local students, you know, coming to the college and understanding that they can come here if they do so within, you know, the first year of graduation and have their, you know, expenses paid for.
We've also.
So all of that, these are estimates, I mean, these are.
Yeah, I know. We've also, from time to time, looked at the question of trying to capture students who basically were pre-promise students before that program was available and maybe didn't take advantage of the opportunity of coming here. And so that, to me, would be a potentially fruitful area to recruit further.
yeah, and all of those sorts of efforts do require some sort of dollars committed towards them. So.
I think what Marcia's referring to, Peter, was back when at Policies, Jack Friedlander, they put together that report of folks in our community that had once been SBCC students, and then they looked at the data of why they stopped coming and different things like that, and then there was a plan to, you know, get that. And so anyway, but I do appreciate the question because it's fair, and so I wouldn't want James, our, you know, headlines, SBCC's recruiting. I feel that what you're speaking to is already codified in our board policy, BP 5012, and so those programs know what numbers to stay within, and so we don't have to, you know, Luz has done a great job printing out the little cards that I keep in my wallets. The statistics are there. People are know. So when we're talking about contract expenditures, FTEs, or recruiting, at least I'm comfortable because the policy that was presented to us, and back then Dr. Gaskin explained this was a far better way to project than if we just had the percentage. And so folks in the community can feel comfortable that there's a policy, it's in place, and this is not going to be like something that I don't even know what they would think. So I hope that they think what it is, and it is what's in the board policy.
Yeah, and all of these numbers are looking, like I said, to restore our FTES, not grow.
Right.
It really is restoration, and particularly like in the international area, we're capping the increases on this at 1,200 students.
Yeah.
So
Thank
that's
you.
still well within policy. Okay, so real quick, just another one of our assumptions that's built into here is continued use of the RAP program, which is just a committee that reviews any open positions and determines whether or not we're going to rehire. The assumptions in this are the same as they've been in the last couple versions of our projections. Same thing in the educational efficiency area. This is something that our ed programs area is working on. We didn't change anything in terms of these assumptions. There's some relatively modest decreases in terms of overall, and that would be mostly in like the adjunct salaries area.
So I didn't see BRAC in here. The BRAC process will still continue too. So we've got RAP and BRAC.
Yeah,
I know that's a pet project of yours, so I was surprised I didn't see it in here. But anyway.
Yeah, that does continue. There's not much built into here in terms of savings on that. I think we've plucked all the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, from that area. But we do continue to review all departments' budgets every year as a committee and go through and really try and make sure that the budget that we're bringing forward as our tentative and ultimately our final budgets are really what the departments are needing, and that we don't have a lot of extra in there, and that we're also not leaving things out that departments need. Kind of works on both sides of it.
Just following up on the efficiency, not for now, but could we at some point have a larger discussion or presentation on where we stand on that? I know we looked at the numbers relative to faculty, but there's also the component of staff, and there's a whole variety of things that feed into efficiency, and I would like to get a better sense of progress that we've made maybe on some of these fronts and where we might have to go. I noticed you don't have, I don't think that slide is still up there, but you had the assumption that there would be no further reductions, and does that mean we're there, or what does it mean? But not today, just as we go forward.
Yeah, so this is something that's still being worked on, and we didn't want to be too aggressive in this area.
Trustee Nielsen?
Yeah, comment to Dr. Beebe, really. Right after I got here, I knew efficiency, did I turn, yeah, sorry, I was coughing earlier. Right after you got here as president, efficiency was one of the areas that you had noted that you were looking at to address. And we know we've made progress, but I'd like to just reiterate, I don't have to, but I want to refer to what Marcia just brought up. It would be really helpful to the board if we could look at, where we were, where we're at now, which metrics are you using at this time to look at that stuff, so we can get some kind of comparison and an idea and what effect it actually had.
Yeah, we can do that on multiple levels. We enjoy that kind of thing as finance and accounting.
It'd be kind of fun because a lot of effort and agony went into the changes that we had to make with
absolutely.
With what went on, and to be able to look at how the numbers transformed in just a little more detail, so we had a better feel for it. At least me, I would like to see that.
We can do that. It's good.
Okay, real quick on this slide is basically just a reminder that minimum wage does continue to increase over the next few years, and just kind of highlighting what we built in. That 4% increase, these are the dollars kind of associated with that. Like I said, it's about $100,000 a year. So here's the pension increase slide. This does break out STRS and PERS, gives you an idea what the rates are projected to look like going forward. You can see PERS continuing to increase all the way through 22, 23, and I think it's also projected to continue to increase beyond that. STRS rates, you see with the governor's new proposal that increase to 17.1 next year, another 1% increase after that, and then holding flat there. This is basically in response to the large unfunded liabilities in these programs. They've moved to close those gaps by increasing contributions on an annual basis. So if you look at this, you can see how much about we're spending in each of these areas. It also, if you look at the difference between the years, it's about $1 million increase between 18-19 and another $1 million between 19 and 20. And then it goes down and essentially stabilizes about a $300,000 and another $200,000 the year after that. So really the next 2 years are the biggest hits for us. And then assuming STRS doesn't continue to increase after that, it should start to level off a little bit for us.
So James, because the state's adding additional contribution to support us in 2021, but not 18, 19, 19, 20? Or they've started kicking us back
So
money?
they're starting in 1920.
Okay,
The governor's proposal is to contribute $3 billion directly to STRS as a rate buy down for us.
Oh, good.
So these, if you look at previous versions of our projections, the rates for STRS were originally slated to go up to 18.1% next year and 19.1% the following year after that, and there's no change in future years beyond that. So we should see immediate relief from that beginning next year, assuming everything stays in the budget as is proposed.
Oh, good. I think the last graph we have stopped at 2021, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing keeps going.
So, yeah, unfortunately, PERS, the legislature has a lot of purview over STRS. PERS is a separate entity, so that does limit what they're able to do in terms of that. So every chance I get, whenever I see anybody, I'm always screaming, can we get something to help with this?
Yeah.
Because those numbers do get rather large. Okay, so I'm going to move past this one relatively quickly. This is all the detail of the numbers. We have a summary slide a couple slides later that breaks down, puts all these numbers into just a little bit easier to read form, but we did want to put the actual detail by major object in here. So the transfer details, much of this is relatively similar to what we've seen. You do see it in 18-19, that large transfer in from Extended Learning Reserve Fund. Other than that, going forward, we do see the transfers in decreasing. We do get money every year from the Financial Aid Media Campaign that we're a fiscal agent for. We also have other grant administration money that comes in, just kind of our overhead share of the grants that we're running. So those always come in. On the money going out, we did increase slightly our money going to the district projects fund. That's our construction fund. We broke it down to about as bare bones as we could get the last few years. And we've seen an uptick in the amount of work that we're having to do maintenance-wise as things break on campus. So we felt that we probably needed to increase that, at least at this point. IT refresh, you see the jump from 375 to 750. That's because that we've been living off of old reserves for a number of years. In the 17-18, you'll see we transferred nothing for IT refresh. In the previous couple of years before that, we had also transferred nothing. The move to 750,000 is just the return to what they need every year in order to do the IT refresh. That 750 is also a significant reduction from what they used to spend on IT refresh. Food services, we do need, that fund is not quite a self-sustaining fund in order to provide kind of that higher quality food to help our students. We do need to transfer a little money over there, and then we've always transferred money over to the Children's Center.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that IT is getting slowly funded to, I mean, you think, oh, IT refresh, but 3 years is old in their world. And so for them to have the latest to keep our campus safe and functioning, I feel like that's of top priority.
Yeah, they've done a lot of things in order to save costs. And so they've pared down what I believe was a $1.2 million budget to a $750,000 budget, while still keeping our machines running quite well. So.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop.
So here's the summary slide I was talking about. This basically breaks everything into just the simple revenues, expenditures, our net of the transfers in, transfers out, and then gets to that nice yellow bar, or I don't know if it's nice yellow bar, of what where we're expecting to end the year in terms of either deficit or minor surpluses. So 18-19. We're coming in a little bit below where we were hoping to come in at the beginning of the year. If you remember, our original budget was right around a $1.6 million deficit. If we're rounding, now we're looking at about a 1.8. Revenues are coming in a little bit weaker, particularly at the state level. We did get recalc come through from last year's revenue. That always comes in February. That was negative a couple $100,000 this year. Which is essentially an adjustment based on last year's revenue. Our property taxes came in stronger in the local area, which means that as they adjust, the state was supposed to send us less money. That comes through in this year's budget.
So, James, just so I'm clear, if we make an apple-to-apple comparison between what our projection is now compared to what it was in September, we could go back to slide 5, I take it.
Pretty much, yes.
That just shows you what we thought was going to happen then. Now we can see what's going to happen.
Yeah, as we've changed the assumptions, that's why we do like to always provide that where we were the bulk of what's changed. There's obviously a lot of other small changes that goes into it, but that's what that slide of kind of what's changed since then is. Those are the biggest changes in the assumptions between now and then you can get down to this and really see where we were hoping we would be in September and kind of where we're thinking we're at now. So you do see, if we look just at that yellow bar line, about a $1.8 million deficit is where we're thinking we're going to end this year. I do want to say that it is still early. Things do change, but even between now and then for this year. So this is our best guess at this point, but we will keep bringing that back as we look at things throughout the rest of the budget development process. 1920, it does get significantly worse. Again, that 1% decline in FTES does hurt us. So we would be in a hold harmless from a state revenue perspective, but you did see on the expenditures assumptions, we do have a lot of expenditures that continue to increase, even though our revenue would stay relatively flat. 1920, as we begin to recover, that should hopefully start to decrease that deficit. 2021 and, I'm sorry, 21, 22, and 22, 23, that deficit gets significantly smaller. Of course, as you're getting further out in the years and projections, that gets a lot harder and harder to project. So.
Trustee Kroon.
In looking at those two charts, the one on page 5, our previous projections, and this one on page 21, what I'm seeing is about $2.5 million more taken from our reserves, basically, or using ending balance drop in 1920 and 2021. So between the two of them, it's about $5 million. What is it the FTES that you just mentioned?
That's the biggest piece of it, yes.
That's the piece of it?
Yeah, that is by far the most significant piece. We were, if you remember what Lindsay was saying at the beginning, we were projecting that our FTES would stabilize this year. It's in fact gone down 2%. And then we were hoping to start restoring next year. We've switched that from restoring 1% next year to declining 3% or declining 1%. So there's a significant swing in those, but that does kind of seem to be what we're seeing in the numbers right now. So that's why we built that in.
We also continue to have the $1 million increase in the PERS and STIRS. We also continue to have the $1 million increase in expenses on STIRS and PERS.
Yeah.
I mean, with how like radically negative 1% of FTES can be on our budget, I mean, I feel like we cannot continue on the way we're going. I mean, even if we discourage 1% of out-of-state students, which there's been messaging around, we don't want those people, it's destroying the college. It could destroy our reserves and our budget. And so I'm just really concerned about, I mean, thanks for illustrating this, that 1% can cause a deficit like that, and that we can't continue promoting the way we've been going because it'll continue to destroy our budget, and then we won't be able to provide any good services to the people who live here when they were born or the people who moved here later on in life.
I would say that's something of an exaggeration. Didn't you just say 2% was the difference in FTES?
Compared to
We dropped
where
2%.
we were in the current fiscal year.
Right, and I mean, what we have to do with our budgets is deal with reality. So there are unknowable factors. You make your best guess on whether we're going up or down on FTES. We've referenced the idea of a recession might increase FTES. The demographics nationally and locally are pushing down. So I think that we just have to work within what turns out to be the case and do our best.
Without destroying the college infrastructure that we have. I mean, we can't just let the world happen and then FTES decline, our budget shrink, and then we have to fire people. Like, I don't want to get to that point. It's concerning that if we keep dropping FTES, our budget's not going to be in good health. And I think we need to do things that don't decrease our FTES.
By far, our FTES come from within California. So that's
I'm
what
not
I'm
arguing
talking
that.
about.
I think
Yeah.
that's an awesome thing. But if someone from Ventura is coming here, that's fine. But if less people from outside the county are coming, or outside the service area are coming, that's going to impact the budget and impact what we can provide to the people who were born here or who lived here before they decided to go here.
President Beebe?
You know, I mean, what you're suggesting is one factor. I mean, there's so many components to this, whether it's the PERS STIRS element going up, whether it's the economy, whether it's the Promise program that Trustee Parker was talking about, keeping people more local. It's a huge economic model, really. And to your point about the marketing efforts, that's one of the reasons why we baked in those marketing efforts the way we have, so that we can continue to push back on the reduction of FTES and try to restore that. We're trying to be as conservative as possible. One of the things, and you all know this, that we've done in the past is we always have some kind of growth factor in there, like, you know, we're always going to be growing somehow. That isn't realistic. And so we're trying to be we spent a lot of time, I know Dr. Ralston and all of us have spent a lot of time trying to be as realistic as we possibly can on these numbers. I mean, and so until the May revise comes and we actually have something more solid to base things on, it's going to be a little bit up.
I don't have a problem with the numbers. The numbers are great, actually, and the numbers actually paint a picture saying that 1%, if we project a certain growth or shrinkage in FTES, and then reality doesn't match that, then our budget continues to shrink. Like, we could say there's going to be minus 1%. What if there's minus 2%? And that is, as I think you mentioned, a 1% difference, you know, if it's minus 2 instead of minus 1, can have very large impacts on our budget, even though it looks small when you say 1%. And that's the point I'm trying to make.
Gotcha.
That even if we lost 1% out of area students who are from California, that can be harming our budget and our ability to do a good job here. And that's what I'm trying to say. But so I'm not disputing these numbers. I think these numbers are great. I mean, it's not good to have a deficit, but I think they look well done. But I think we just need to keep that in mind, that there is an image that we don't want people who aren't from Santa Barbara to be here. And I think we can't have that image because it has budgetary impacts.
Okay, so I'm going to let Lindsay take it from here.
All right. I'm just going to wrap up the last few slides here. I always like to do my favorite slide on the general fund balance. So just before we go to the next slide, I like to point out so everyone understands how this works. So when you look at that yellow bar there, you're looking at the deficit for each year and then a surplus out here in 22, 23. So this ending balance, this is the unrestricted general fund ending balance. It's just like your savings account at home. If you spend more money than you brought in, your savings account is going to get smaller, right? So you see this dollar amount getting smaller as we go out, and then in this last year it's increasing because we're adding to our reserves. Okay? So this is where you see that information playing out. The blue bar is our unrestricted general fund reserves, and you can see how they're declining each year because we have that deficit in our budget going out, and then out in that last year it's kind of leveling off there. The red bar is our equipment fund, and then the green bar is our construction fund. These are all really unrestricted general reserves, but we do have them allocated in different funds for various reasons. The equipment fund, the board minimum is $1.5 million, and that's about what we're spending down, as James mentioned before, spending that down, and so we just project it out at the board minimum. The construction fund is a little different because we'll recall a few years ago we put some one-time revenues in there to fund the campus center. That project we would have had to put in a local match, so we put the money aside for that. And we are using some of the funds in there, not the campus center construction portion, but the other construction funds that we have set aside for maintenance projects on campus. And so I show that projecting down to about $12 million, which is roughly what we put in there for the campus center project after we've done some repairs to that building as well. Okay, so the lines here, this bluish purple line is the state mandated minimum fund balance. We are mandated to have at least 5% of our expenditures in reserve. So we have that there. Our board has set a policy a few years back that we will hold 5% plus a 15% additional reserve amount for either deferrals or unexpected expenditures. plus bank TLUs, which is a small dollar amount, about another $1 million. So it ends up becoming about a 21% reserve that our board policy states we're going to keep at all times. That's this goldish yellow bar. So right now we're well above it, and then we just kind of barely dip below it in 21, 22 with these projections, and then stay back above it in 22, 23. Okay. So as we talked about earlier, a lot of things continue to swing and move with the new student-centered funding formula. Just last week, the Chancellor's Office published the first principal apportionment report for 18-19. It's called P1. They just released it last week, and there was a webinar put on by the Chancellor's Office that James and I attended to learn about what was included in it. It's a whole new report, and based on this new funding formula, we were very intrigued to have listen and have them explain it to us. We were a little alarmed as the Chancellor's Office went through the report and explained that there are multiple errors throughout the report, and they were not able to clarify how those errors impact the funding that's calculated in the report. And they explained that they'll be reissuing it again at a later date, possibly in April, with those corrections made. So it didn't give us a very feel-good feeling that what we were looking at was even accurate. And this has become the norm with this new student-centered funding formula, where they're supplying a lot of updated revisions as they fix things throughout it. The most alarming part of what has been published in that P1 report is a 5% deficit factor. A deficit factor means that the state has a pot of money, I call it kind of one pie, of what we're allocated for all community colleges. And as each community college gets their piece of the pie stays the same, but the pie slices might change. So this new funding formula has changed the pie slices for each of us. And every community college is trying to do better with this new funding formula. You know, if you give someone a rule of how they can make more money, they're going to work through those rules and try and figure out how to make more money. So the projections right now at the state level are showing that everybody's going to make more money with this new funding formula, but the pie is staying the same size. So what they do is they create a deficit factor, and they say we don't have enough money to fund everything that we have put together in this funding formula. Now, the alarming piece of this is a 5% deficit factor we've never seen before. I've checked with other CBOs in the state. Usually it's 1% or less. This is a very, very large deficit factor. It equals $4 million for us. It's very significant. So many of us CBOs and CEOs are knocking on the Chancellor's Office door saying, how is this going to work? So it creates a bit of alarm for us, where we want to really keep watching what's happening and see how the state is going to respond to this. It's just not making much sense mathematically, and this is something that we started talking about last January when they started putting through the idea of the student-centered funding formula, and the first calculations came out. Many of us questioned, how are they going to fund all of that? So this was no surprise to those of us that were keying in on how this was coming up last year. So I expect a lot more conversations about this between now and the May revise, and additional changes, because it's not really clear how they'll fund what they've promised they're going to fund now. So we do expect all of these things to continue to change, unfortunately, in making these projections and budgeting difficult. So right now we're starting our budget process in quite a bit of detail. We will have our next version of 5-year fiscal projections as a part of the budget process. So next time you'll see the 19-20 tentative budget and the 5-year fiscal projections together. So they'll be like the next year's version. Excuse me. And as Dr. Beebe pointed out earlier, of course I'll talk about BRAC. It's our favorite committee, the Budget Resource Allocation Committee. We have a lot of work to do with that committee, where we review every single budget in detail. It's turned out to be a great process, like James mentioned. It ensures that departments have what they need and not what they don't need, and that those budgets are really accurate. So we'll be going through that process shortly. And this timeline here is the timeline of everything the board is going to start seeing with the budgets. We have a lot of presentations. You're going to start seeing us pretty much every board meeting for the next few months as we get into this budget development process. And we come to the board with kind of small, digestible chunks of the budget, because it's so much to review all at once that we've taken this approach for the last couple of years, where we break it up into pieces and go through it. And we'll be anxiously awaiting information on the new student-centered funding formula. I think we made it.
Any questions? Trustee Croninger?
The 5% deficit, is that taking into consideration the current revenues, which appear to be also a shortfall over relative to the governor's budget? And I know Dr. Beebe referenced this earlier, but revenues for the month of February, for example, were 19% below what the governor's budget had estimated. That's just 1 month. It varies monthly. But the overall numbers were lower as well.
Yeah, that is one of the things that on the webinar we were on last week that the Chancellor's office did mention, that that's one of the reasons revenues are coming in lower, so the pie has kind of shrunk a little bit, essentially.
So you're saying you think that it may be in the 5% deficit they were talking about? Okay.
Yeah.
That's better than not.
Trustee Parker?
Thank you. Yeah, a couple of questions. One is just to clarify for the public that sometimes questions this. Back on page 19, when you talk about revenues, you break it up into state and local. And can I assume that when you're talking about local, you're talking about local property tax?
Yeah, so local includes both local property tax, enrollment fees that come in for students. Students are paying $46 a unit for their classes, so that's included in there. International and out-of-state tuition's included in that number.
Gotcha.
And then a bunch of other miscellaneous local number.
Because we do have community members that always are like, well, you know, I'm paying property taxes, and I know part of it goes to City College. Why can't that just cover it? And I mean, I think that really lays out that it can't.
So we get funded on what's essentially what they call total computational revenue, and we'll break this all down when we do the full budget presentation. But total computational revenue includes general apportionment money that comes from the state, local property taxes, and enrollment fees revenue. All those combined come up to a number that the state says this is what you're going to get. So if one goes up, the other one goes down, because the formula gives us that total computational revenue.
And then my second question, which I don't know if you've done this analysis, so it's fine if this is something you need to get back to us with. When you look back at your FTES projections over the past 3, 4, 5 years, how accurate has City College been in estimating FTES for the future projections?
Well, we've been looking to try and start recovery before we just keep getting a little bit lower. So unfortunately, they haven't come in quite where we've been hoping for.
So if I look back on these reports from previous years, the percentages will have been whatever they were, the estimates would have been what they were, but then the students came in lower.
Yes.
We've never really had, so if you look at that slide where the peak was, there was a lot of things that, so basically, yeah, right there. And so that's where all these, there's so many different pieces that are working in tandem. That's where that efficiency conversation came in, that the faculty's working on. It's the funding, it was the STIRS, it's all these different things. It was the foundation. We have always had good reserves. And so it's really, what they've started us with is sort of like a baseline and really starting to look at what is an optimal size for our college, what is our community supporting. Jeff Creed at the foundation, they have been starting to look at what are going to be the impacts of different Promise programs across the state and different things like that. So,
well, I think what I'm getting at really is just that the reality is that projections have not jived with the enrollment. And so with that, I think it's critically important that, I don't know if it was this members of the sitting board or previous boards, that you have that 15% buffer, because clearly your reserves are very, very important.
Our reserves.
Yeah, that's why we have them. We do not want to lay off employees. The reserves in the past have given us flexibility to avoid that. And that is a major part of why we have them, and it went through full participatory governance. I think it took us 1.5 years to get to those numbers. When early, Peter, when you and I came on, we started that process, and it was very much thought in those terms. I mean, we're hedging for the possibility that things will be not as rosy on revenues or higher on expenditures, and that we might have some tough years, and we need to have that flexibility. So that's why we keep looking at that, at Lindsay's favorite chart. We started it when we were doing that with reserves.
It's also why we've insisted on maintaining the reserves that we have, because I mean, the combination of the reduction in force plus feeding the budget from our reserves has brought us a success. We are where we are today because of it. But there were people who argued that we shouldn't have that kind of reserve. And the problem with that assumption is that we've spent over $6 million feeding our budget, when in fact the state mandated reserve was less than that. So I mean, we really have lucked out. Well, it isn't luck. It was effective planning. We
that was
insisted
planned.
on holding that line.
Yeah.
And they're referring to Board Policy 6305, our reserve policy.
Yeah.
Trustee Abud, did you?
Yeah, I had a technical question and then a more fleshed out question. But the first one is just to follow up on the local revenue. It's very technical. It's basically if a student gets financial aid, do you log that as tuition revenue, or is that just not charged to the person? Like, do we count the money the state is giving someone for a BOG waiver as revenue to us?
That actually does come out of the revenues.
It doesn't come out, or
It does come out.
So it's just
So it
less
reduces-
revenue?
It reduces our enrollment fee revenue
Okay.
by the amount that the state's giving us with that.
And it just comes in as state revenue then, like the
It
financial?
doesn't come in, it actually doesn't really show as revenues.
Okay.
It the California Community College Promise Grant, or the old BOG.
Yeah.
That allows us to essentially waive those fees. So
Okay.
they just become not revenue.
So we just don't have the revenue. I've just been
Doesn't
curious.
show up.
Yeah, I've just been curious. I just wanted to know. And then,
But I would just add, while we're on that topic, isn't it the case that, let's say, our base number, our total number is 100, and you subtracted 4 for the BOG waivers, that this general state contribution will still take us to the 100, the general fund piece of it?
Sorry, I lost that line.
Okay. What I'm trying to say is, that, and you were explaining earlier, we have a number which is going to be our revenue based on the calculations, now the more complicated calculations. And if property taxes are low, general fund makes it up. If BOG waivers are not revenue to us, general state revenues make it up.
It doesn't change the number of students outside of the new funding formula giving us money in terms of the supplemental allocation for those students. Outside of that, the number of students who are getting that waiver does not affect our revenue.
That's what I'm getting at.
So it's net zero.
So
It's a net zero.
On that financial aid revenue, other types of financial aid revenue, that comes in a separate fund, gets paid out to students, and then does show up in revenue. But
Okay.
It's just that particular fee waiver that doesn't show up anywhere in terms of revenue.
cool, that's good to know. And then my request would be in the future budget, one of the future sessions, if we could have a slide or a couple slides that kind of illustrates financially and in a budget model how we are structuring our budget in order to maximize future revenues with the SCFF. Like, I know it's obviously it's not the most predictable thing, but how are we spending our money, and how can we look at that visually and financially to know that we are, making these expenditures in order to, in the future, have higher revenues, because these expenditures will lead to higher graduation rates. They will lead to higher low-income students coming to SBCC. It would be nice to see that, because we can think about that in a programmatic way, like, oh, we have EOPS, and we have this, and we have that. But it would be nice to look at that from a financial and budgetary visual, just to know this is where the money is being spent that will then help lead to these outcomes that will then bring us more revenue. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, if you look at the vision for success that the State Chancellor's Office has put forth, you look at the new student-centered funding formula, you look at, some of the other goals, the guided pathways, AB 705, and you put that all in a crosswalk, that's really what you're saying, and that's really the big picture that we need to put forth for you all. And so it's a completely legitimate request, and one that we'll put together. I mean, I'm looking at Dr. Ralston. We can do that. So that's totally legitimate.
Thank you.
Probably what goes with that is some form of a calculation of return on investment, too.
Yeah.
Trustee Nelson?
Yeah, I like what the question that Kate asked that Marcia responded to about the graph and the blue line, and about what happens there. Let's see, it was 6 years ago. What had happened the previous year is, see, the reserves, and Peter said it's like, and Marcia, they said it's to protect the jobs and the salary, so we could do that. But when the student count went way up and the revenue was lagging, they cut. Okay, so when the cuts happen, that's when it's kind of the same as what you're used to. But when the cuts happened, what the college did was, and this was, you know, what this just before Jonathan's time or right about when he came on, but it's pretty much the reason, one of the things I've been working on all this time. And when the cuts happened, they cut sections of classes, which hurt the student throughput. They cut that because lack of money, but they didn't spend the reserves to keep the sections open, really. They cut that, but they kept all the people. So what happens is now, the reason I'm going here is because now we're looking at a different funding model. And if our funding is going to be based on student throughput, then, and I wanted them to not cut those classes. We have lots of reserves. In fact, at the end of that year, when they cut those classes, they added a few $1 million in the 1 year to the reserves. $6 million to the reserves. Well, they cut classes before. I didn't like that. I didn't like what I saw. That's why one of the prime reasons why I came on the board, why I ran for it. So now we're looking at this thing, and I think this new funding formula could change kind of that outlook. It's worth looking at to really try to understand what the dynamics are, because when if the economy takes a dip on us, our enrollment's going to go up, but the state's revenue is going to go down. It's just facts of life. So now we have more students and less money. And then right now it's the opposite. And then still we're not ahead of the game money-wise, because we're still spending in reserves. So this new funding model is going to be interesting to see how this puzzle really fits together, and I think it's important to really watch that carefully. And then I learned something a few days ago. I won't go into a bunch of detail, but I was really interested in what happened with the remedial education and the changes and how that's funded and how that's going to go through. So I did talk to someone from Florida about that, and I talked to someone from Minneapolis who was actually from California before, and she's heavily involved in Minneapolis. So these are areas you can research to see how this funding kind of thing works, or the remedial education changes will work. I don't know. They have a different funding model in both Florida and Minneapolis than we do. So I think it might be worth investigating those funding formulas to see how that plays out and how that could impact our implementation that the state says we need to do with the remedial education classes. And then I'll just touch on, and then I'll probably be quiet, but I have the opportunity. I'd like to voice another concern related to this. With the remedial classes, with cutting those, I don't think it's, it has had very positive results, and I wouldn't, in both the state of Florida and here, but California implemented it, and I didn't, and now there's a funding model change, and I don't know if that correlates or not. So I'm going to be trying to figure that out. I'm hoping that this change in how we do remedial education and get students up to date can increase our throughput rate, which will make us look at even better, but it might do the same for all the other colleges, so net change, no difference. I just get real concerned about the student throughput and how we're serving our district. And when you see the education gap, which is what this is really trying to, the gap, it's that they're coming to high school, 60% of them aren't college ready, and we're doing these classes. When you look at that gap, it used to be, well, the colleges would say, well, it's the high schools, they're sending us a bad product. And then if you go to the high schools, they say, well, it's the grammar schools, they're sending us a bad product. And then what you've heard in the last years is that, well, we need pre-kindergarten classes paid for by the government. What that really tells me is that that's like nobody's taking ownership. So this kind of thing, cutting the remedial classes, making these changes, it's like finally the college isn't blaming anybody. They're saying, okay, this is the product, we need to do better, and this is how we're going to go about it. In Florida, it was highly contested when they started this, and after the first year it was implemented, there was no change in outcome. Very hard to measure in that short a period of time. At the end of the second year, there was an uptick, and then it got better the next 2 years. Minneapolis, same experience. Their funding formulas I don't know details about, but I think they were different than ours. So I'm real interested in that, if somebody maybe could point me in the right direction to find that so I could read it properly. So we have real advantages here at SBCC. We have one of the prime dual enrollment programs that's really helpful in that. We got all kinds of good things going in our favor. We were Aspen Award winner. We're doing a lot of things right here, a lot of things. And we need to really build on those strengths. To me, one of the most important, and I mentioned this earlier in a different framework, but to me, one of the most important reasons and goals that we have is to build and maintain the reputation of this college. Because if you demean the reputation, or if it falls or gets tarnished, every time that happens, it makes it harder to do what we do. And that's why I want to do things in a positive way. Not denounce things, but let's say, oh, here's an opportunity to do better. How can we do it, and how can we do it and build on what we've already done, or justify the changes? It's just a matter of approach and how you look at it, and I love the discussion earlier today, but we don't have enough time to spend all night on it. So when you think about these changes that we're doing and what the benefits that are possible for the community, when you see that students can maybe see that, wow, there's a benefit from going to college, and maybe they'll try harder in high schools, and maybe we can help the school districts, and we might even be able to do better at dual education, and working with the high school districts, and it'll go downhill. Because everybody says the problem's coming uphill, but if the solution goes downhill, by setting an example instead of a mandate, we might be able to have a positive effect. That's where my mind's at. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Trustee Nielsen. Any other comments or questions? If not, I'll let Lindsay and James be excused and tell you that, as usual, you've made us smarter than we were before your presentation. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry you had to sit through
really
my
good
diatribe.
presentation.
No, thank you. It's good to see you guys tag teaming again. Thank you.
So do I hear a motion for adjourn?
Now, let's stay
Is there
here
a
till
second?
midnight.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hear none, we're adjourned.
I didn't get enough done.